Well, good evening, everyone. This is not what I was expecting to be doing tonight, but this is quite urgent. This crisis is unfolding worse than we expected it would. We now apparently have Russia beginning their attack on Ukraine. This comes at the same time as the United Nations Security Council convened just a couple hours ago. The Ukrainian individual or representative decried that there is no purgatory, that Russia will be going straight to hell for their actions. Right now, there are attacks underway on military headquarters, airports, railways, communication infrastructure in both Kiev, Odessa, big cities, small cities, full-scale attacks, artillery attacks. We do have some video that we'll be playing in a moment. And Ukrainian representatives are essentially now begging the world for support, the toughest potential sanctions on Russia immediately. This morning, Boris Johnson in the Financial Times, which is a United Kingdom-based publication, decried Boris Johnson for his, quote, pea shooter sanctions against Ukraine, targeting mid to small-sized banks. The United States was also laughed at for targeting two larger banks, but not going as far as potentially sanctioning Putin directly or sanctioning more aggressively, such as targeting the SWIFT banking system to cripple the Russian economy more so. Unfortunately, these sanctions have been held for future tranches. The toughest sanctions are being called for now from Ukraine. The United States government, the Biden government and administration have so far decided that it would be better to approach Putin with tranches of sanctions. The first tranche consisted of sanctions against two large banks, the largest infrastructure bank and financing bank. I liken them sort of to a national Fannie Mae, like we have for our mortgage market in the United States, but rather for every kind of development in Russia. And then this second would be their military branch. Together, they're believed to hold about $80 billion worth of United States assets. The Russian Wealth Fund has already reduced their $186 billion of U.S. assets to essentially zero well in advance of this attack, in expectation that there would be sanctions against Russian ability to actually sell any kind of U.S.-based assets, which is exactly what Joe Biden did yesterday. He banned Russian ability to sell U.S. bonds, which would be a way to raise capital to potentially further fund their attacks. There are representatives presently in Kiev discussing the need for specifically air support. They suggest that the aim of Russia right now is to demilitarize the country, that is, demilitarize Ukraine, that a full-scale invasion is potentially warned, that Putin has decided to, quote, conduct military operations in Ukraine, and that individuals in Ukraine should, quote, lay down their arms and go home, that Putin does not, quote, intend to occupy, which I don't know if anyone can really believe at this point what Putin suggests, given that we've had 4 weeks calls from Putin that we had nothing other than Western media and Western hysteria suggesting that there would be an invasion. Ukraine now calls this obviously a war of aggression. Biden calls this unprovoked and unjustified. Ukraine argues, and this is potentially to create fear, that we need to be more aggressive with Putin now, that Putin will not just stop at Ukraine and could potentially advance World War III. Now, we don't expect that, given the prior instances of aggression in both Georgia in 2008 and Crimea in 2014, leading to peace deals and annexations anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 weeks after any kind of incursion. We are now seeing some haven assets reacting well. These are actually emerging market stocks. However, we do not expect them to last long. We are seeing oil right now not only breach $100, but already at $101 for Brent. This is your international oil. This is the first time oil has hit $100 since the Crimea crisis. This is an increase of almost 4.5% on the price of oil in just the last few hours here. The WTI cost of barrel, which is the US style, is $96. These are the highest prices we have seen for oil, well, again, since 2014. Now, bonds, interestingly, you are seeing the 10-year Treasury bond fall yield-wise to under 1.89%. The reason you tend to see this is because people will often flee to U.S. Treasury bonds, which are deemed to be safe or risk-free assets. So sometimes they can be deemed a safe haven. At the moment, we're seeing gold futures up 1.675% to $19.42 per ounce. The pre-market is not looking great, although it is looking better than it was looking not too long ago here. Let's go ahead and pull it up. I personally prefer, and it's not sponsored, but I personally prefer the investing.com app. It doesn't have the lag that CNBC does. The investing.com app will show you that, excuse me, the Dow Jones is presently down about 639 points, down 1.93%. S&P 500 down 80 points, or 1.91%. NASDAQ 100 down 317, or 2.35%. And the Russell 2000 small caps down about 39 points, or 2%. If you compare this to the day, these indices are actually almost reacting worse now than they had actually performed in the day. So if you thought the losses during the day were bad, at the moment they unfortunately appear to be worse. And we also have spreads, unfortunately beginning to indicate, they're providing us concerning indications. Let's go ahead and take a look at these, and then we'll go jump over to some live news and feeds as well that we could find. So first, I'm going to look at the 10-2 Treasury yield. We are now at a spread of just 36 basis points for the 10-2. This is not good. This is the, I'm just going to hide myself here for a moment. This is the 10-2 spread right here at 36.4 basis points. Not ideal at all. The 5-10 spread, by the way, is also quite low. This right here is the 5-10 spread. You can see this is the lowest that we've seen since 2019, leading up to the 2020 recession, since 2006, leading up to the 08 recession, and 2000, leading up to the dot-com bubble burst. Not good. This obviously is increasing some hawkish views that we could see commodities continue to rally. We've already seen commodities explode in valuations. Almost all commodities are up substantially. Commodities such as oil, obviously, but iron ore, wheat, soybeans, coffee, almost all commodities are up substantially year to date, and this is hurting. And not only does this hurt all commodities, but it especially hurts commodities that we see in that are specifically associated with the region of Russia and Ukraine. This will include wheat. Wheat is surprisingly a commodity that is substantially affected. Wheat is presently up 20% year to date, partially due to these sorts of concerns. The only commodity that's really down right now is sugar, only down about 1.8%, but coffee is up about 10% year to date. Look, we've only been in this year for 7 weeks. So year to date figures are huge. Oil, natural gas, all up 25 to 30%. Aluminum up 17%. We have nickel, a rare earth mineral for electric vehicles, certainly, and batteries, cobalt and nickel. But nickel up 17%, corn up 20%, 28% on soybeans, and again, that 20% on wheat. These are substantial figures. Now, right now, we do know that Russia outnumbers the Ukrainian armed forces substantially. Ukrainian armed forces are expected to be estimated at approximately 145 to 150,000. This is in contrast to the potentially as much as 200 or even more thousand troops that Russia has surrounding Ukraine, in addition to Russian reservists. which we've recently seen Russian reservists go from essentially bunkered positions or barracked positions to combat-ready positions. Generally, you only see reservists go to combat-ready positions when Russia is essentially prepared, or an army is essentially prepared to invade, and then have reservists keep peace after an invasion, so that way the front line can essentially continue to move. Air defenses, substantially outnumbered. Naval defenses, substantially outnumbered. This is specifically important to the north, but more important to the south. The focus here, of course, on the eastern region of Donbass and the capital, Kiev. We've heard explosions as well, and we're going to go ahead and play a little bit of video here. We are at the moment seeing cryptocurrency prices fall, as are stock futures. Unfortunately, BTC has not played its role as a safe haven asset against either inflation or geopolitical tension. Bitcoin presently sitting at 35,000, which means we have broken support levels in the 36,000 range, and we're now down at 35,000 for Bitcoin. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the related tweet videos that we can find on this. So here is one of them. We've got a few of them to look at. Let's take a look at this one here. So we've got various different shots here, or maps showing and videos showing explosions. Jeez, terrible. Let's take a look at another one here. Assuming this is an eastern region. That's a mushroom cloud right here. So some folks are saying that this is potentially just the beginning of an incursion, that right now the objective is to disable the as much of the military as possible. This is also Biden's wording, that presently the goal is to demilitarize Ukraine and the Ukrainian government. Let's see here. We are also seeing European stocks falling more than 3%, and they have not opened for business yet on Thursday in Europe. It is presently Wednesday evening in California here. Again, a warning that emerging markets are being declared unlikely to last as a safe haven. Risk assets absolutely vulnerable here, so expect more pain in especially technology related or high PE or profitless tech style companies. We generally see economic pain after oil hits $100 per barrel. There are conflicting views in terms of what this could mean for the Federal Reserve's action. It could potentially mean that if we have a short incursion here, it could mean aggressive action by the Fed to quell inflation if the economy remains hot. If individuals are fearful and stop spending, and then we could actually see inflation reduced by a reduction in aggregate demand. And when we see a reduction in aggregate demand, that is when we can reduce the incidence of the wage price spiral, but also we can reduce the potential inflationary impacts that we could have from high oil prices. Ukraine has declared a state of emergency. Keep in mind, if you want to submit articles or videos or commentary or anything, you can go to metkevin.com/chat, metkevin.com/chat. And there is a Ukraine thread that you can join. Let's take a listen to this on Fox here for a moment.
Unfolding, and they had tried to, we'd seen many, the president himself there in Ukraine trying to calm the tensions, the feeling, the anxiety, saying, let's stay calm, let's continue to operate our daily lives. And, you've seen people say they stayed there because they have family, they have business interests, they have their employers, and people who wanted to try to continue life as normally as they could. It looks like as morning is dawning over there, that chapter is over. By the way, let's check back in with Lucas Tomlinson. He's on the ground in Lviv. What can you tell us from that vantage point, Lucas?
Just look at the folks leaving Ukraine. It's unfortunate that this is happening, presumably relatively late.
Kiev, the capital, Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine, and also Odessa. In the last hour, I told you an amphibious landing by the Russians was being prepared. I can now report that Russian Marines are on the ground in Odessa. So far, we've seen primarily missile strikes targeting what the Russians say key infrastructure and military targets. But what we've seen in the past few weeks is this enormous buildup of Russian forces, 150,000 strong. Earlier in an address to his nation, Ukrainian President Zielinski says 200,000 Russian troops have invaded. We're seeing three different lines of attack. We're seeing Russian forces come north from Crimea. We're seeing them coming from the separatist regions and also into Kharkiv, just over the border in the Russian city.
Regarding Odessa, by the way, just take a look at this for a moment. This is on Twitter here. Look at this. This is individuals, or it looks like civilians fleeing. Just, you can see the traffic leaving here. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry, I had the audio source spot. Explosions heard in Odessa. Let's listen.
Odessa.
Some of these are a little difficult to tell. This was also from Odessa. We saw this earlier already. Terrible. Got what looks like a fire here. Russian embassy staff seen burning classified documents. This is from Wars on the Brink on Twitter here. Really? Russian embassy seen burning documents. What was interesting was a couple days ago, we did see the Russian, actually it was yesterday, the Russian government order all individuals to leave Ukraine who work for the Russian government. I do imagine that some individuals were left behind, but this wouldn't surprise me. Again, Putin, if you're just now joining, has announced the start to military operations in Ukraine. This is being declared a special military operation, and it includes demilitarizing Ukraine. Explosions have now been heard in Odessa, Kiev, and other cities, smaller cities. Oil is over $100 per barrel now, especially Brent over 101. S&P futures and NASDAQ futures down 2%. The Ukrainian president is urging Ukrainians not to panic, vows victory. It's worth noting that just yesterday, the Ukrainian government has enabled citizens to the right to bear all arms. This is something unique for Ukraine, not so unique for Texas. I realize that. Ukraine's president has also declared martial law, urging citizens, again, not to panic. Moscow has also suspended all trading across all markets as this begins. Let's listen to Fox here for a moment.
The first time we have heard these sirens since war erupted between Ukraine and Russia. Earlier in the night, there were at least 36 strikes taking place in different locations around Kiev. According to officials that we've talked to, these strikes were targeting military barracks outside of the city and also other key infrastructure around the Ukrainian capital. It is not just Kiev that is under attack. The second largest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, cities like Odessa and Mariupol in the south taking fire from Russian forces. And we also understand that that amphibious assault that my colleague Lucas Tomlinson talked about is underway at this hour. Make no mistake, this is a full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine happening right now, and the air raid sirens going off in the Ukrainian capital as we speak. Shannon.
All right, Trey Yingst.
Okay, so we are now receiving news that Putin is demanding forces in Ukraine surrender. Russian forces fired several missiles at Ukrainian cities, landed troops on the south coast on Thursday. Explosions could be heard in the pre-dawn quiet of the Ukrainian capital. Gunfire rattled near the capital's main airport. Russia is demanding an end to NATO's eastward expansion. Russia cannot feel safe, develop, and exist with the constant threat of emerging territories from NATO. This is from Putin. The European Union chief has just vowed to hold the Kremlin accountable for these unjustified attacks. Unfortunately, so far we've seen nothing but talk from the West. And of course, this is increasing the risk to consumer inflation. Let's listen in.
The different locations across the city have opened up their bomb shelters, including the metro system here in Kiev, so that if there are civilians out in the streets, when these sirens go off and when the raids start, they can go underground. The thing to remember here is that this city was prepared for this to happen, but the understanding that it would take place really hadn't set in until the past 48 hours. We heard President Zielinski, even when we spoke with him just about a week and a half ago, basically saying he disagreed with the U.S. intel about the possibility of a full-scale invasion. He was trying to keep the people here calm. But tonight, it was very clear when he addressed the nation that this was imminent and that he understood it was imminent. He switched from Ukrainian to Russian and pleaded with the Russian people to put pressure on their leader, Vladimir Putin, to call off this invasion. Obviously, they were unsuccessful as the Ukrainian capital and the rest of the country is under attack as we speak.
All right, Trey Yingst, new tonight, now morning there, that those air sirens are underway. We will check back with you, Trey. Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Kevin Corke because we are getting a lot of reaction here in Washington, Democrats, Republicans alike.
I'm going to pop over for a moment to see.
One of the reasons they might do that is because they might be intending to fly aerial, manned aerial aircraft, regular aircraft, to sort of more, pinpoint target particular buildings, particular assets, air assets, or whatever other military command and control assets they want to in this city and also elsewhere as well. Look, I mean, I don't know why those air raid sirens have been blaring out for the past couple of minutes. It was a surprise. It was a shock to us, as I expect it was a shock to most other residents of this city. It may have just been a practice in case there are air raids in the future. But I mean, given what we're currently witnessing, I mean, we can't rule out the possibility that that the Ukrainian authorities are warning the people right now about possible more air raids in the minutes or in the hours to come.
I think the possibility you just read my mind. The possibility they want people to.
All right, that is a little odd. I'm going to pull back on this for a moment. Let me see what we have here. So. The President Zielinski of Ukraine has declared martial law in the country because of the Russian attack. Speaking in a televised address to the nation shortly before 7 a.m., he did not clarify what restrictions would be in place. We're going to go ahead and try to get a map here to, let's see if I can get a map up to track where this incursion is currently taking place. Here we go. So here's a present map that we have. And so we could see here, this is the eastern frontier, the separatist region. We do have in the south discussions of military amphibious units and Russian Marines landing to potentially overtake Odessa. This follows air artillery, especially at airports, and reports of gunfire at airports. We have known for weeks now that Russian troops have built up along the northern border, Belarus, and moved closer and closer to the border here to take control of the capital. There was a suggestion earlier today that potentially Kiev should join NATO, just the capital itself, which I think is quite literally the opposite of what Russia is hoping for. So let's see here. What else do we have here? So besides those from Kiev in the north, reports of military engagement extended to Odessa in the south, where Russian troops were landing by sea. Russian state media is portraying this as a moment of liberation, as Russia describes this as a special military operation. Ukrainian airspace has been closed to commercial flights due to potential hazards for military aviation. 20 minutes ago, Biden has spoken with the president of Ukraine. I'm not quite sure what Biden is going to do. We do have, it looks like, some footage here of an explosion in Kiev. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. You can see that here in the distance. It's a live cam here. Okay. The next wave of U.S. sanctions are expected to be announced by President Biden tomorrow morning, which unfortunately could still be 12 hours away. And that's not good. Yeah, 1 hour ago, we've been reporting that the invasion has begun. Let's jump on over for a moment to CNN. We'll hop over to Fox and such.
All of this, and yet who will ultimately be the ones to bear the brunt of, as what Matthew called it, this multi-pronged major attack by one of the world's most sophisticated militaries?
Germany's Olaf Scholz has now declared this a blatant breach of international law. And it does look like the White House has issued a readout. I'm going to try to get this of the call.
Because people are heeding that directive to stay at home. Schools are closed today, according to the mayor's post. Also, people are being told not to go to work. They have been told that public transport is working, though. They've also opened this public bomb shelter that, I think probably everyone here wishes they would never have to use. There's no sign that people...
All right, I'm going to read this out really quick. I know they're talking about the bomb shelter here on CNN. President Zielinski reached out to me tonight, and we just finished speaking. I condemned this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. I briefed him on the steps we are taking to rally international condemnation, including tonight at the United Nations Security Council. He asked me to call on the leaders of the world to speak out clearly against President Putin's flagrant aggression and to stand with the people of Ukraine. Tomorrow, I will be meeting with the leaders of the G7 and the United States, and our allies and partners will begin imposing severe sanctions on Russia. We will continue to provide support and assistance to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. That is a statement from Biden's readout here. Ukraine now says that Russia is intensively shelling Ukrainian troops in the east. Ukraine has now stated that Russia is shelling airports and military sites. I'm going to look for video of that. In the meantime, we do have this here, which I believe this was this is the Russian embassy burning files in a courtyard. Doesn't appear to be audio of this. Okay, so we talked about Biden. Let's see what else we can find regarding Odessa here if we just do a quick little search here. I would like to know where these... Okay, this is... how do they... Look at this. The forces of... It's almost like the Russians are on TikTok or Twitter here. This is just a search phrase here for Odessa. I do feel like I'm just getting spammed, unfortunately, though, with nonsense here. So let's just go to videos and see what we can get for top vids. So what do we have here? Oh, yeah, look at this. Documents being destroyed at the Russian consulate. Yeah, that's what's happening here. They're throwing documents on the floor. You can see the barbed wire up top, sort of an armed compound here. Wow. Reminds me of, oh gosh, what was the movie? I can't think of the movie right now. It's been in many movies. But anyway. Okay, let's see what else we have. Let's pop on over here. We'll pop on over to Fox. We saw the statement from Biden. Let's go ahead and get the statement here, or let's see what Fox is talking about.
There are very real implications of where we go from here, of where Europe goes from here. You heard the member of parliament that we had on from Ukraine, who said he doesn't think Putin is going to stop at Ukraine's borders, even if it is successful within Ukraine.
And that
United Nations chief has now urged Putin to, quote, give peace a chance. And there's a report now that a CNN reporter in Kiev paused during his live report to put on a flak jacket after hearing explosions. So that makes for good TV. I don't know if he meant to do that. All right.
Don't know the numbers, are gathering in front of the Russian embassy in D.C.
I was thinking, was it Argo or Jason Bourne? I can't remember which one. It was one of those. Jason Bourne sounds pretty accurate.
Are folks that a big amount of the Ukrainian community in the U.S. gathering in front of the Russian embassy from different states now coming to Washington, D.C. We'll see how that develops. And lastly, the foreign minister from Ukraine, and again, I keep referencing that he was on set with special report, but it was interesting to talk to him because in the commercial break, he said this is a really tense moment, obviously for him as foreign minister, but for their country. And he was leaving to go to New York to the UN Security Council and then back to Kiev. But he just puts out, the world must act immediately. The future of Europe and the world is at stake. To-do list: 1, devastating sanctions on Russia now, including SWIFT. 2, fully isolate Russia by all means in all formats. 3, weapons, equipment for Ukraine. 4, financial assistance. 5, humanitarian assistance. This is Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba of Ukraine, just putting that out.
This is what Ukraine is calling for. Whether or not they get that is the question. So far, it doesn't seem like they are.
That was one of the things he mentioned. He said to all of my Ukrainians in the U.S., we need you to do this. We need you to show up. We need you to contact your lawmakers, make your voices heard. And so them gathering here at the Russian embassy in D.C., I might have to swing by there on my way home in the middle of the night, see exactly what's going on there. But that's something he's called for, those who have a voice, who are free, who can try to influence policy here and around the world, to stand up for those who are still in their homeland there in Ukraine. We want to go back to Trey Yingst. He's been covering minute by minute the developments in Kiev. He's there on the ground as the air raid sirens, I understand, Trey, continue.
That's exactly right. Over the past 5 minutes, we've heard the air raid sirens go off again in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. Off in the distance, a small explosion, but this gives you a sense of how this is continuing at this hour. We do know Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zielinski has declared martial law across all of Ukraine. The mayor of Kiev is asking residents to stay indoors at this hour. Just over the past hour, though, there's a big police station behind us, and we saw the parking lot fill up with cars, and police officers get out, and they're currently standing outside of the building. So martial law is in effect right now in Ukraine as the country braces for more Russian attacks. It's not just the capital, though. Other cities, as we've talked about, Kharkiv, Odessa, Mariupol, the list really goes on in terms of the different locations that are being targeted by the Russian military. This was the campaign, the worst case scenario that was talked about here in Ukraine taking place right now.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that right now the Russian ruble has fallen to levels in value relative to the US dollar that we have not seen really in I mean, I'm going back to 1994 here on the chart, and I can't see the Russian ruble to the dollar spot being this low. I'll share a screenshot here, but this is just what the chart looks like. And the higher it goes, it means you need more of that currency to buy US dollars, right? So higher would actually be lower. Higher would imply a weaker currency, and it is getting drastically weak here. It's no surprise that the Russian government has shut down the stock exchanges in Moscow and throughout Russia. 10-2 Treasury yield spread now at 36.4, something that that is frequently seen as potentially a precursor to a recession. Though questions are how long this potentially could last, and its longer term effects potentially on inflation. Now, air raid sirens, as of 1 minute ago, have been ringing again in the center of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Donald Trump has now responded and blasted Joe Biden, suggesting that Joe Biden is, quote, asleep on the job over Putin's military invasion of Ukraine, and says the Russian leadership saw, quote, weakness in the United States. Donald Trump now officially coming out to slam Joe Biden for this Russian attack. Boris Johnson says that Putin has chosen the path of bloodshed, and that the United Kingdom will respond. Now, earlier today, we did have Boris Johnson slammed for pea shooter style sanctions against Russia. Johnson has just gotten off the phone, by the way, with Zielinski. This follows a call from Biden. Keep in mind, if you want to post updates, if you don't mind, please go to metkevin.com/chat and then look for Ukraine. There is a chat section there. It's free for you to go to metkevin.com/chat and throw some links for me. Let's take a look at this here for a moment. What do we got here?
No, I think that that's exactly right. I mean,
Hold on a sec. Wrong one here. Is that this one? You could see these shellings here and explosions in the back. Let's see. Oh, wow, there you go. Got impatient. Watch here. Oh, it cut. There you go. Okay, so this is near Kiev, Ukraine. Let's go ahead and get this up on the map. Let's see if this is close to eastern or northern border here. Just gotta close that here. Let's kill that audio. There we go. So that's here. That's also along the border. So obviously we have attacks here in Donetsk. Here now, seeing shellings here in Kharkiv and in Kiev. Not good. So this is really showing us that we're getting attacks here at Odessa, Kiev, here, really from all sides right now. All sides. Let's pop on over for a moment to Fox.
Brett, how concerned are you about that possibility that this slips beyond borders, whether intentionally or accidentally, and triggers an Article 5 obligation for NATO members?
Yeah, so just so you know, Article 5 would be an attack on one is an attack on all for NATO members. This would be a worst case scenario, World War III style scenario, which is not good. Not good at all. Let's listen in.
Take aggressive action now, not only with economic sanctions. I disagree with my co-panelist because I believe there are ways to send a very clear message to Putin, especially on the home front where he is weakest.
Quick note, I just got a message from someone here, and I have not verified this, but they say that Russian flights have been halted until March 2nd. which does imply a potential full week of these styles of incursions here. Now, looking here in our Discord, and shout out to those of you posting these here in Discord. Let's take a quick peek at some of these posts. Stand by. Look at that shelling in the distance. That's terrible. Ay, ay, ay. I mean, every one of those flashes is an explosion. That's a lot. Let's take a look at another one here. Oops. So it's difficult to tell what this one is. This looks like a surface-to-air missile here. It looks like that was potentially intercepted. I mean, I don't know, but that looks like it was either it targeted a plane or it was intercepted. But yeah, usually, I mean, you see this at like the Iron Dome in Israel. These surface-to-air missiles, they end up getting it. But then you would have potentially seen another missile here. So it's quite unclear what this ended up targeting. Okay, let's pop back over.
The worst thing for our interest, and we need to contain this and not escalate it to where we could get drawn into a war.
Those are Grad rockets. Look up Grad launcher on YouTube. Okay, we'll pull that up. Let's do it. Grad launcher. Aha. Take a look at this.
From where the anti-government fighters are preparing this Grad missile launcher, they're acting on intelligence that there's a buildup of Ukrainian army troops, armored personnel vehicles, and tanks not far from here. They're going to fire, and then we need to get out of here as soon as possible because there's the fear that there'll be missiles coming in.
Is this too loud, by the way?
When they start firing, are you going to come across to me? Where's safe to stand? God knows where.
So apparently,
you know we're safe to stand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm playing the wrong footage here. A little too loud. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I had the wrong footage up. My bad. So these are the Grad missiles. Apparently, this is from Russia Today video here in Ukraine. They haven't shown anything yet. Here we go.
Yuri, I don't want to die, so where should I stand?
So they haven't really shown a launch here yet. I wonder if they will now. Yeah. Yeah. I hope I didn't blow you up there with the audio. Let me know if that was, I think this is probably coming through a little hot. But anyway, ouch. I'll lower that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, all right. Let's hop on over to Fox for a moment here. Sorry about the volume. Holy, that was loud. Sorry, I got to deal with that. My bad.
Just the Ukrainian Interior Ministry is out with an early statement here saying that the state border of Ukraine was attacked by Russian troops. Again, this is Ukraine's Interior Ministry, saying the state border of Ukraine was attacked by Russian troops from Russia and Belarus at about 5 a.m. their time. Attacks on border units, border patrols, and checkpoints are carried out with the use of artillery, heavy equipment, and small arms. Border guards and armed forces of Ukraine and National Guard of Ukraine are firing at the enemy. Casualties unknown, but they're saying dozens of casualties is the estimate so far with fighting along the border. And again, this is the border with Belarus. We've talked about how there could be this move from that side to try to get to the capital quickly on the ground. It appears that there is significant fighting, according to the Ukraine Interior Minister, along that border in the early morning hours. and obviously the airstrikes that we're seeing with our guys on the ground and the air sirens that are still going in Kiev.
Yeah, and there had been concern in recent weeks about military exercises, about not only, one border that appeared.
Just a quick note, we now have BTC dropping lower now to about 34,646. Futures actually holding steady, unlike BTC. We'll pull up futures here above my head here for a moment. We've got Dow Jones down 204, S&P 500 down 1.98 right now. NASDAQ Tech down about 2.39. Shout out as well to FTX for being a sponsor for crypto trading. If you want to trade using TradingView and maximize your TA skill, check out TradingView. And you could use the code down below to get up to $10 in free crypto. This is the 1 minute chart now here on TradingView for BTC. We could see this substantial drop here right around 6 to 7 p.m. California time. And as time has progressed here, we continue to trend down and hit new lows. Although we're kind of sitting around the same level that we were about 1 hour ago. Still bobbing around, though. Let's go ahead and see what... Oh, here's Zielinski. Let's take a listen to him.
In the Donbass, Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and our border guards. Explosions were heard in many cities of Ukraine. We imposed martial law throughout Ukraine.
So, Brett, this is important because there was a lot made about top Afghan leaders fleeing when it looked like that country was falling apart. Zelensky, there was some criticism of him. He shouldn't go to Munich and be part of the security conference. But it looks like he's very much committed. His impassioned speech earlier tonight, this video, I'm here with you. The Ukrainian people are going to fight. It looks like he's staying put and says, he keeps encouraging them, saying, we're ultimately going to win this. We are proud people and we're not going anywhere.
There was talk that there were some officials in our government that wanted to get Zielinski out to Poland or elsewhere. Remember, we moved our U.S. embassy from Kiev, and our State Department officials are now over the border. But the parliament is still there. The president is still there. The foreign minister just flew back there. The cabinet is still holding national security meetings in the capital city, and they say they're going to fight to the end.
And again, if you have not heard yet, Biden did speak with President Zielinski, as did Boris Johnson. Futures did just slip a little bit more as well, since I just last looked about 2 minutes ago. But Biden did promise severe sanctions coming tomorrow. Presently, probably in about 12 hours here, as President Biden did condemn Russia's actions in a phone call with the Ukrainian president. We have the Russian ruble now weakening further on these potential sanctions, now to $90 per USD. This is the lowest level that we have ever seen for the ruble in certainly at least the last 30 years that I could see a history of here. In the 90s, this is the certainly the lowest valuation we've seen for their currency, and continuing to monitor updates here. All right, let's keep listening in.
Preceded by cyber attacks, and that's really exactly what happened in Ukraine. The cyber
worth noting, if you take a look at the Ukrainian foreign ministry website, totally down. I can't even get to the website. Certain Ukrainian banks, similar issues. Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate that. Thank you for your vote on governor, and thanks for the $5. So a Ukrainian here in our Ukraine chat and Discord says that Russia launches strikes only by military airports, military bases, and arsenals. And then potentially strikes in Odessa that are air defense strikes. We're trying to bring down some drones. Maybe that's what we saw a video of earlier. Just a few minutes ago, we saw a video of one of those surface-to-air missiles. I think somebody mentioned those are the Gant missile, or something like that. Anyway, potentially striking drones. It does sound like right now that most of the attacks are near the border, Sumy, Kharkiv, and other areas here. It does now. It does look like the Spectator Index on Twitter, though, it reported about 3 minutes ago, troops have crossed into Ukraine from the Belarusian border. This is just 3 minutes ago. That would not be good. Troops moving in would solidify the invasion belief. 8 minutes ago, Ukrainian military says Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine are repelling an air attack by Russia. And that their Ukraine defense minister is stating that the enemy has begun intense shelling of our units east. It is possible. That's the video that we saw on Twitter earlier, where we saw those consistent flashes coming up on screen of potentially an attack. Yeah, Russia temporarily suspends flights to a number of airports until the early hours of March 2nd. And we've heard air raid sirens now move multiple times. Hong Kong Stock Exchange index moving down 5%. All right, let's flip on over here. See what else we can learn.
In order to try to at least limit what's happening.
I think at least psychologically, there was, I think in the West, we have this tendency to be always optimistic and always thinking, I mean, you hear it from our politicians. We're not closing the door on diplomacy, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin it's really not speeches he's making. He's ranting about how Ukraine shouldn't even exist. And yet, in spite of that.
Okay, we'll just have an update now. Senior Ukrainian official, we believe hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers have died in Russian airstrikes. That's terrible. That is terrible. Though I do believe that. We saw that substantial shelling on Twitter, and it would not shock me to believe that there have been multiple casualties as a result of this style of shelling that could likely lead to hundreds of deaths. Easily. Let me see if I can re-find that. Yeah, here we go. That would have been this video clip here. We're going to hop on over to this, unfortunately. It's a little, you have to kind of look here on the horizon. You can see this shelling here. Unfortunately. Yeah, let's hop back on over here for a moment.
None of it's making sense. Even earlier in the week, giving justification for an invasion by using a history that does not exist of Russia and the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Again, Don, I think this is sort of one of the problems that we have here in the West is looking through a Western lens and trying to make sense out of what Vladimir Putin says.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It does to him, though. And it does, in some sense, to the Russians that he's speaking to. I think the largest target for that ranting speech that he gave the other night was the Russian people.
Here's what looks like an attack on an airport. We're going to take a peek at here briefly on Twitter. And let's see if we can get that up. It's just a brief little 4-second shot here of what looks like fire at an airport in Ukraine. Particularly here, it says the Kherson airport within Ukraine.
Talks about how Kiev is run by Nazis. He's talking about the government. He's not just talking about the Donbass. He's not just talking about trying to help these make-believe countries that he helped create in Donetsk and Luhansk. What he's talking about when he talks about Nazis is he's talking about Kiev, and that could foretell a sort of decapitation type of operation where you get a lot of military stuff going on, and then he sends folks in to basically take care of the government.
Quickly, because I need to get to other stuff, but I want to ask you, as you were listening to the sirens, the airstrike sirens going off in Kiev, I heard you, I saw you sit up and take notice, and wow. What were you thinking when you heard that?
There's a note here now that potentially the Ukrainian Air Force has potentially successfully shot down a Russian aircraft, which is obviously going to be provocative for Russia.
Finds itself in. Sometimes the only thing that's left.
Okay, Russian troops are now shelling from Belarus. And an Air India aircraft to Ukraine has now U-turned. Yeah.
But hit that button and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Ukrainian Defense Ministry does deny the potential of Russian troops landing in Odessa from the sea. So this is still disputed. We still don't have guaranteed information here that troops are actually on the ground. Right now, it just appears that we do have the initial strikes. We've now had multiple reports of shellings on the eastern front of both airports and military installations. It does look like the Ukrainian border guard is reporting that they are being attacked from 5 regions along the border. And this includes a shelling from Belarus to the north. And so it does appear like there are potentially airstrikes coming from both or potentially all the north, the east, and the south. And the targets right now appear to be airports and military facilities. This is in line with Putin's goal of, quote, demilitarizing Ukraine. Let's take a listen in here.
Who is running the show on these things like the UN Security Council, the Human Rights Council they've got there. I mean, sometimes we look at the membership of some of these bodies there at the UN and they raise eyebrows and a lot of questions. And tonight's going to be one of those nights. So this is coming in from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Facebook. This is a post attributed to them. They talk about what's happening, the shelling that's been coming in. They say the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is fighting off the air attack of the tanker. They say the defense forces of the state are in full combat readiness, occupied and maintain defensive positions. The situation is under control. Then add this. They say the information.
Okay, there is now talk that potentially an ammunition depot in Kiev is now on fire. This is TBD. But this is now being reported that an ammunition depot is on fire, which is not a surprise given that Russia does have a goal of attacking. This, by the way, is what the capital looks like right now for traffic purposes. This is traffic leaving the capital. Back to Fox here briefly.
In every place. So we have to be careful about how we report it, the caveats that we put on it. But clearly there is an invasion ongoing.
Yeah. And as you've, had on Special Report, we aired the reporting as well. There were warned days in advance. There will be deepfakes that are very convincing, whether it's trying to make it look like a certain leader has said something or what's happening.
Here's just some footage of the air raid sirens. Quite eerie. Wow. Yeah, Jolly, if you can, post that in Discord, metkevin.com/chat, and then Ukraine. Here's a feed, by the way, of present sites of reported attacks. You could see these happening actually quite well into Ukraine here. Here's the Donetsk region. Here's Kharkiv, which we've seen attacks in, Sumy, Kiev. The northern side where we're hearing that there is shelling being launched from Belarus, which is right here. Yeah, almost 3 million people in Kiev. This is true. Very difficult to evacuate. That's terrible. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Joe Biden tomorrow and Russian sanctions. Let's see if we can get any updates here from no. Yeah, this is the same update that I saw here. Russian media reports of an amphibious strikes on Odessa are not thought to be accurate at present. A lot of misinformation, very, very common. Let's see what First Squawk has here for us. This was the ammunition depot, so TBD for more.
The details of that call were released a little while ago. President Biden says that he reiterated that the U.S.
Wheat futures now continue to rally. Remember, a lot of wheat exports do come from Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's top diplomat is urging the world to, quote, stop Putin. The Chinese embassy in Ukraine urges Chinese citizens to, quote, stay safe. Okay. That's an interesting direction.
Allies and counterparts, but it is going to speak to the American people. Any timing on that address to the nation?
Yes, we expect that to be right around noon. The virtual call with the G7 leaders is scheduled to be like something around 9 to 11 in the morning. And then at about noon is when they want the president to come out. But obviously, things are so fluid. And on a normal day, this president does tend to have things stack up and things slide a little bit or get.
Here's potentially some footage of tanks moving into Ukraine. Let's take a look here. You can see that here on the right.
The fastest way for an invasion force to get to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, is exactly from Belarus. There's a pretty new.
This is Zenkivka. So let's take a look at this. Zenkivka. Let's take a look if we can find out specifically where this is. Ukraine. I mean, this appears to be right on the border. Yeah, this is right on the border here. So this would be, if these are indeed Russian tanks, this would be the first move of Russian military here, at least that we can see here, pushing troops into Ukraine. Look at the traffic on Apple Maps. I imagine we could probably also look at that on Google Maps if you're thinking Kiev. Let's see. Although I don't know if it actually live updates. No, it doesn't seem to be doing so. Maybe I would have to look at Apple. Anyway, let's hop back on over here for a moment.
Because Shannon, if you want to bring a nation to its knees, you go after power, you go after water, and then you go after food. They're also going after banking, which causes panic and chaos. People are trying to leave the city. They can't get access to money. So this is part of not only the psychological.
Here, by the way, is apparently a live stream, a link of what's being seen in Kiev right now.
Fastest way for an invasion force to get to the Ukrainian
audio's on and I don't hear
is
anything.
exactly from Belarus. There's a pretty new road that actually.
But so we do have then a live shot here of Maiden Square, Kiev. Okay. Pay attention to that.
One thing we can understand for sure right now is Vladimir Putin can't be trusted on anything he says. Whether the DHS Secretary Mayorkas says there's no credible threat, you have to operate right now because of a war footing that everybody is on, that there is a threat, that something is going on. Russia has demonstrated through its proxies that they have the ability.
Chinese embassy now referring to explosions happening in some cities. And Ukraine now saying that the target is clearly our military infrastructure.
We have intelligence collection centers in Australia, Pine Gap. Those are very critical to us. It doesn't have to be an attack on the American homeland, but it can be attack on American assets and capabilities around the world. But look, here's the one thing. You have to act as though you're about to be attacked right now with what's going on. You cannot take a breath and say, hey, we'll get to this tomorrow. No, right now, you need to be doing everything you possibly can do. You need to have everybody spun up, briefed, ready to go, because what Vladimir Putin chooses to do will be at a time and place of his choosing. And as we're seeing right now, he's doing everything he wants right now without being stopped. Cyber is the one area where we can actually have an impact on his ability to get away with it.
So Politico's nightly email that came out late Wednesday has a quote from the Senate Intelligence Chairman.
Here's a video shot of a photojournalist apparently seeing missiles fly by overhead. Let's take a look at this one.
Fuck, it's crazy. I can't believe that Russia has declared war on Ukraine. That as soon as the declaration, oh fuck, that's a missile. That's a missile. That's a fucking missile. That was one of those, like, holy shit. All right, we've got to fucking get inside. I can't fucking believe that.
Wow, that was intense. That is intense. Take a look. Just see if you could see it here. There it is. Wow. That is intense. Very, very intense. Yikes. Let's hop on over here for a moment. And let's see what we got. Right now we've got futures on the NASDAQ down about 1.59 and S&P 500 down about 2.16. Dow Jones down about 2.2. Let's pop on over here.
Well, in a scale of which I think anybody who's been observing this conflict thought was utterly unimaginable. And then these comments from Russian President Vladimir Putin essentially threatening consequences that nobody's seen in history before. Utterly chilling and a different day.
Quick note, if you want to see yourself any of the tweets that I show up, I'm going to be liking them. Not because I like them, but solely because if you go on Twitter and then you type in Real Meet Kevin, you could go to the little likes tab and then you could see them yourself if that's helpful to you. Chinese embassy in Ukraine now saying that the situation in Ukraine has deteriorated sharply. Security risks up. Ukrainian military says the Ukrainian air defense has shot down a Russian plane in eastern Ukraine. I saw that a little bit earlier too. Let's keep listening in here.
We know that. We don't know what's happened in Donbass. Coming in from the north is the most direct way to get into Kiev. You saw on the video a battalion tactical group moving right down the road. Unless the roads are blocked by Ukrainian forces, they'll be in Kiev in a few hours. And then, we'll see what happens. I assume that the Ukrainians have defenses out there. It's going to be hard for CNN to capture the sites of that. Hopefully we'll get social media of it or something, but they've got to stop.
There are now, this is the video that we just showed. That's interesting about those tanks rolling back. But there are apparently now air defense missiles alive in the western front of Ukraine. This is right here, city, I believe you'd pronounce this Liv, but I'm probably entirely wrong about that, so it's LVIV. And let's take a peek here if we can see this air raid siren here that is apparently in the city. Stand by. Let's pause these. Hold on. There we go. All right, let's listen in. Yeah. Lviv. Oh, yeah, I would have never gotten that from that spelling, but I appreciate that, Al. Apparently LVIV is Lviv. So thank you. All right. Will this make the Federal Reserve U-turn? Yeah, that's the big question. It depends. It depends on how long this lasts and what this does to economic demand. If aggregate demand goes down, it will limit the fears of a potential wage price spiral and inflation out of control. Okay, the Interior Ministry does say that, quote, attacks on residential buildings and civilian infrastructure are not presently expected. Not presently expected. Very good. No, we're not going to look at forensic files. Sorry, we're going to go the other way. That way. Let's see what we got here on Fox.
Yes, we wait for President Biden to speak on Thursday after speaking with his G7 allies and to the American people about just how far they're going to go. And they talk about having a number of tools in this bag that they can use against Russia. But the world tonight across the board.
Okay, so Boris Johnson, Biden, and Schultz in Germany have now spoken with Zielinski. Poland does expect to further strengthen the eastern flank.
Sheet of music saying we're committed to standing with Ukraine. Senator Marco Rubio, who speaks a lot about this, has been speaking about Russia's actions.
In case you have not heard yet, Moscow's stock exchange has stopped trading, and Russia is, specifically Moscow, is banning flights in certain areas until March 2nd. Poland is now seeking far-reaching European Union sanctions.
In the eastern part of the country, again, these are all things that we want to confirm with our own people, but that's coming out from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And I think as you continue on into the hours here, you're going to be getting a lot of reports from a lot of different parts of the country about what has transpired.
And I do think at this moment there's a sense that it seems more broad than many expected Putin would go in this first wave.
Yeah, a question here about whether or not mortgage rates could potentially fall. It's actually possible that the answer to that is yes. In the short term, they could, as the treasuries become a safe haven asset. The more you see the U.S. 10-year treasury rotate down, the more that is possible. Go ahead and listen.
Those who would be tempted to intervene, Russia will respond immediately, and you will have consequences that you never have had before in your history. Putin is sounding exceptionally confident, and maybe a lot of that is bluster just as he leads his troops and tells them to go in and get this thing done. But he clearly seems to think he's got a position of leverage.
Potential note here that Biden is expected to speak at noon tomorrow. So that's about 11 hours from now.
Recent weeks, but it's significant, and it's probably 60, 70, almost 80% of the Russian forces along that border with Ukraine. It's going to be a test, though, for the inner city battles with Ukrainians who have been armed and are ready, they say, to defend their country. Putin has a vision. He has a vision for not only taking over the Soviet Union map, but also rejiggering the world order.
Yeah, no kidding. This is a tweet here from the foreign minister of Ukraine. Putin has just launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strike. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. Now is the time, or the time to act is now. Japanese defense stocks surge on Russia, as Russia launches attacks on Ukraine. Obviously, we've seen oil climb, and we'll come back to some more insights here.
Hopefully everybody's going to be safe.
Yeah, we count on them, and we are grateful to them. All right, that is it for Fox News at Night extended coverage. Trace Gallagher is going to pick up our continuing.
That's all right. We'll pick up. Okay, France now reiterating their support for Ukraine. Let's take a look at how oil is moving at the moment. Oil now almost actually at $102 per barrel. We were last at about midway through 101. Now knocking on the door of 102. Got a note here from Kyle James. Ukraine military says 5 Russian planes and 1 Russian helicopter were shot down. Let's go and take a look at this region here. Let's see here. That would be Luhansk region. And by Donetsk. And this would be the Eastern Front. All right. Take a listen in here. Oh, look at that background.
In the hours ahead. But at this hour, there are reports Russian troops can be seen entering Ukraine from Russia and Belarus. Now, we have not independently verified that, but martial law has been declared as explosions rattle Kiev and other cities around Ukraine. Russia says military bases are being targeted, not populated regions, but everything the Russians say is being taken with a grain of salt. They have been untruthful this entire time. Meantime, at the White House, President Biden is condemning Moscow for what he calls an unprovoked and unjustified attack. But it's unlikely.
Yeah, it does look like it was B&O News that provided this update here that Ukraine's military says 5 enemy planes and a helicopter shot down in the country's east, reiterating this news that somebody else just posted.
Allies for refusing to ban Ukraine from joining NATO, and Putin is slamming the U.S. for having missile capabilities near Russia's border. It's an ever-escalating conflict that efforts of diplomacy and threats of sanctions by the international community have so far failed to resolve. So in the coming hours, we'll be keeping watch on the fast-developing events with our team of Fox News correspondents. We have Lucas Tomlinson and Trey Yingst on the ground.
Somebody here mentioning that an airport, Ivano-Frankivsk military airport, is blasted, as well as airports near Kherson.
From Ukraine, let's go live to Steve Harrigan. He's on the ground in Kiev. At daybreak, Steve, what are you seeing?
Hey, Trace, try and give you a sense of the mood here in Kiev. Certainly a terrifying morning for the 3 million people who live here. I'm just watching cars right now pull out. A lot of people who live here didn't believe this would ever happen, didn't believe that ballistic missiles would be exploding in their city. That is what is happening.
I'm not going to put this video here on YouTube, but there is a video now circulating on Twitter. It is called Ukrainian Soldiers Eliminated as a Result of the Night Clash in LPR. You could go to my like history or just look up this particular username here. And you can see this graphic video of, unfortunately, what would appear to be potentially bodies of Ukrainian soldiers on the floor, which I'm not going to show here on YouTube.
Border guards as well. Border guards on the Belarus-Ukraine border. This is significant because a mass of Russian forces have been in Ukraine, more than 30,000 strong there, along with forces from Belarus. It's a straight shot down here to the capital.
At the moment, it does look like, jumping on over to our sponsor for this video, FTX, it does look like a Bitcoin is moving up from about 34.3 as a low now. And this is a lower low than what we've seen of about the 34.6, but now bouncing around 34.8.
Those tanks, those armored personnel carriers are coming this way. It's a cloudy morning. We've heard jets overhead, although the airspace is closed. We've heard helicopters too. So we're really just trying to figure out, in literally the fog of war here, what exactly is happening. People are fleeing. Air raid sirens are going off. Shells are hitting. Russian forces on the move. This is not just an invasion, a little incursion in eastern Ukraine. This is something bigger. This is a full-scale invasion. We've heard from President Zielinski. He said he's staying put and that Ukraine will fight. They've got an army. They've got an air force. They're a million strong. A lot of civilians are going to fight as well, too. Certainly outgunned, outspent by the Russians. In the short term, certainly the Russians do have the advantage. But I think the next...
It does look like that at the moment, Poland and Baltic regions are calling for NATO to potentially invoke Article 4. Article 4 is different from Article 5. Article 5 is an attack on one, is an attack on all. Article 4 actually has to do with calling the parties of NATO, the members of NATO, together to essentially consult on a potential attack or a threatening of territorial integrity. At the same time, Ukraine, obviously, at this point has declared a state of emergency, recommends that citizens return home Ukraine right now indicating they do believe that residential buildings are safe for the time being. However, certainty can't really be provided here.
Worst case scenario would be for armored vehicles to be inside a city and to be trapped and to be pinned down and then to have their supply lines attacked. I think they're going to try and move quickly and get the job done here in Kiev. We've seen masses of Russian armor and personnel carriers entering eastern Ukraine, and now they're on the move from Belarus. I think that's the key point right now. Ukraine is being attacked from all sides, from the north, from the east, from the south. They've gotten a lot of aid from the West, a lot of weapons from the U.S., but this Ukrainian army is on its own. We haven't seen a tremendous amount of preparation, really a lot of people in denial. And now this is a big one. This is not a minor incursion. This is Putin.
Here's another shot from the same Twitter account that showed the graphic images. These look like tracer rounds here. Oh my gosh. Watch here, mid. Oh, you can see what looks like a strike on the city right here. I'm going to try to pause on that strike. Yeah, there it was. I missed it. There it is. Yikes.
Years, which could also happen as we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq.
I think you're right, Trace, and that's why so many people really didn't believe this would happen in this way, because the risks are so enormous for Russia by launching a full-scale invasion on Ukraine in defiance of most of the rest of the world. The risks, even militarily, are huge, while the gains could be, in the short term, quick and successful for the Russians. In the long term, it's tough to see how it stands up. We got some hints at Putin's thinking over the last few days. We heard him in a rambling, unsettling, unhinged hour-long address where he went through Russian history from Lenin all the way through to the present day, where he basically said, Ukraine's not a country. It's not a real country, and we're going to teach them a lesson. One man can call the shots in Russia. One man controls the country, controls the nukes, controls the army. That man is bitter. He's angry. He's humiliated. He wants revenge. And everyone in his general staff.
There's some talk that a couple of or just that last Twitter account there was potentially propaganda by separatists. I can't confirm either way.
Great coverage as always. Steve, thank you. Well, let's turn to our senior White House correspondent, Peter Doocy. He's live for us at the White House. And Peter, clearly the president is watching this very closely. You said that he had a conversation earlier with President Zielinski of Ukraine. What do we expect to happen at the White House in the hours to come?
Trace, things have quieted down a little bit here since the two big batches of activity, which we understand were a secure call where the president was briefed.
EU leaders to meet today on further restrictions, and Poland is looking for far-reaching sanctions, as well as we already know, the United States planning severe sanctions against Russia tomorrow.
From what a senior administration official told me, the president promised that later on today, he will announce some new sanctions. We don't know exactly if they're going to go as far as sanctioning Putin, something they have said is on the table, but they are going to stick with sanctions, something that this White House is very insistent upon. There is no circumstance under which this president will come out tomorrow around noon, we believe, to say that U.S. troops are going to go to Ukraine to fight Russia. That just is not going to happen. The president is going to continue to try to work with European partners. He's going to talk to the G7 on a Zoom.
Now, there are rumors, and I want to clarify, they are just rumors, that the United States may have troops in Ukraine to help provide defense or strategic purposes, although this is just rumors. I haven't seen any confirmation of this, because obviously Biden has said no troops in Ukraine, but then again, they could tell us one thing and do another.
Community that Putin wants to be recognized, he wants to be respected and have standing amongst the other global powers. They think
Russian apparently defense ministry now says that Ukrainian air defenses have been, quote, neutralized.
he will stop doing something like this. But so far, this White House, you know, the day started, or at least yesterday, with Jen Psaki saying they thought that first batch of sanctions had Putin improvising and adapting his approach. They said they still thought that there was going to be some sort of an invasion, but we have not heard, with all the talk about an imminent invasion, about everything, at least a warning really, about everything that our teams on the ground are seeing, which would be some of these missile strikes that appear to be launched from the Russians all over the country. So things are changing quickly. Things have quieted down here at the White House, but a busy morning that starts with that G7 Zoom about less than 8 hours from right now. Trace.
You talked a lot, Peter, and you've been doing yeoman's work about these sanctions. Is it your sense and the words you're getting from the White House that they're not going to all come at once? They're not just going to throw the whole kit and caboodle at Putin. They are going to kind of implement these things in a fashion that suits the European.
In their tranches, in their darn little tranches, to try to deter Putin from taking more bad action. Here's a live cam of Kharkiv. Showing not too long ago some explosions here. Bouncing back to Fox here.
You basically have infinite possibilities. You can always go back and create new sanctions on somebody. You can make them more severe, more significant. And so there has been some reporting out there tonight that the rest of the sanctions are coming tomorrow. I'm told that's not an accurate description. We just don't know what's going to be in there, but a senior administration official told me.
More footage here coming up on screen from what appears to be two fires at the Kharkiv airport that could be seen from apparently this person's townhome. Back to Fox.
That he's got all the rest of the G7 leaders on board before he does anything. And he thinks that that is a show of strength that Putin will respect.
Yeah, well, he may or may not be right. We will find out.
Remember, Putin has warned that whoever tries to essentially get in the way of Putin will essentially regret that. That if he says, quote, if you try to get involved, we will respond the likes you've never seen before, says Putin.
Third time. We have not seen any Russian fighter jets or bombers or supersonic bombers overhead. So this could be a test. Western Ukraine has largely been unscathed. There are some reports of some military airfields being targeted about 2 hours to the northeast of here. But so far, all is calm here in Lviv, the cultural capital of Ukraine, located about 6 hours west of the capital city. I think it's important we talk about how we got here. Trace, this is a crisis that many people say is 30 years in the making when the Soviet Union fell apart. It's very clear that Vladimir Putin wants to put it back together, put the Russian Empire back together. When the Soviet Union disintegrated, it was a very small ceremony that took place in the woods of Belarus in 1991 with the leaders of the...
This, by the way, was what it looked like when Putin announced his incursion into the Donbas. Let's take a listen.
With accordance to the Article 51 in the 7th chapter of the UN Charter with the sanction of the Federation Council, and according to the Friendship and Mutual Help treaties with Donetsk and Lugansk republics, I have decided to conduct a special military operation. The goal is to protect the people who for 8 years suffer bullying and genocide from the Kiev regime.
Yeah, and this is obviously the Russian justification, not necessarily the what's actually happening. But let's keep listening.
And for this, we aim for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. We'll bring to the court those who committed multiple sanguinary crimes against civilians, including Russian citizens. We do not plan to occupy Ukrainian territories.
Yeah, this is something that we saw as we began our reporting here, and as a result of this, we've seen a lot of coverage about attacks on military headquarters, airports, railways, communications. We've seen videos of attacks in on the eastern front, Kiev from the northern front, shellings from the northern front, Odessa, talks of attack, even potentially amphibious landings, though we're not certain about that. At the same time, we have a lot of air raid sirens in various different parts of Ukraine. Right now, we do have futures down substantially. We have NASDAQ futures down about 2.13, actually not as bad as they were. S&P futures down about 1.75, slightly recovered here, and about 1.79 on Dow. The Dow, again, also slightly recovered. Same thing with BTC. If we hop on over to Bitcoin, we are back to about 35,000 at the moment, presently off of the lows, as potentially some of the further aggression has presently slowed, although the day has just begun in Ukraine.
Be on the border of many other NATO countries, and he'll have NATO on his doorstep, which is what he fears and has such issues with. Trace?
But Lucas, you go back to that speech that Vladimir Putin gave a couple of nights ago, and as you mentioned, he's saying
4 minutes ago, again in Lviv, air raid sirens, again, warning of a potential attack in Lviv on the western front, which is the furthest from Russia.
Your brothers and sisters, and maybe they're saying these are surgical attacks. These are surgical attacks, but it's very hard to walk back any kind of aggression like this in the days to come.
Well, we heard from Ukraine's foreign minister who called this a full-scale invasion, and the war.
Also, more talk about Russian-backed separatists, on the eastern front line of the country, apparently using any weapons at their disposal to fight.
Fighter jets or bombers, but clearly this is a country under attack. As Brett Baer said earlier, it's a very dark day for Europe, probably the darkest and most violent that we've seen since the end of World War II, Trace.
I just quickly want to go where you are in Lviv, Lucas, because we saw the pictures of Kiev. We have the traffic, people going to Poland, people fleeing. There's martial law there.
Hong Kong index now down about 3.1%, not as much as before. The Japanese Nikkei down about 2.1. South Korean Kospi Composite down about 2.7.
Right now, Trace, I'm seeing a number of cars on the street. I'm seeing life. I see a woman walking her dog right down there. A little traffic jam, people going to work.
This, by the way, where this reporter is on the western front.
The air raid sirens that
furthest away.
We're not sure if that's a test. Again, we have not seen any Russian air activity, no fighter jets or bombers, and we have not had any missile strikes here. But it is a bit surreal. Of course, in the march up to the invasion, we heard the reports out of the Pentagon. We spoke to officials. We heard the dire assessments out of the White House, of course, and Jake Sullivan, who actually expected this to be, this would start with short-range ballistic missiles and airstrikes. That certainly came true. But the people on the ground here were, they kind of shrugged their shoulders. In fact, they were like, well, we've been at war for 8 years. And one gentleman I interviewed on the street said, well, I have guns in my safe. I'm like, yeah, but do you have short-range ballistic missiles in your safe? I mean, that's what the Russians are bringing to this fight. And sadly, we've seen that to devastating consequences. But it is worth noting, the Russians...
By the way, worth noting that this video that we've seen on Twitter quite a few times now about the shelling occurring in Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city, has now been verified by the New York Times as accurate. So this is indeed a shelling by Russian forces just about an hour ago.
Reporting, but I want to play President Zielinski. This is on social media talking about martial law, and then we'll talk on the other side.
This morning, Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbass. Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and our border guards. Explosions were heard in many cities of Ukraine. We imposed martial law throughout Ukraine.
It's a good indication, Lucas, that the president is going to stand and fight, that he's going to stay there. Nobody's leaving. Parliament is planning to stay there. There was a parliamentarian on earlier who said, listen, we are staying, we are fighting, we're going to gather, we're going to try and come up with...
They're hodling.
but we're not going anywhere. Clearly, some people are heading to the Polish border, and they think as many as...
Okay, the Wall Street Journal is now reporting that, quote, potentially hundreds of Ukrainian service members have been believed to have been killed in these Russian attacks, likely amongst the Eastern Front, where the airports are, unfortunately. This is clearly being defined as one of the potential worst-case scenarios here. Ukrainian parliament has now backed martial law imposed by the president of Ukraine. EU leaders now are discussing massive and severe sanctions on Russia in the strongest potential terms. And they are immediately calling on Russia to cease hostilities. Well, a lot of good, unfortunately, that is done. We are almost now at $102 per barrel on Brent. Sitting at we are just 6 cents away right now. Now up about 5.3 rather now percent on Brent. Now only 3 cents away from $102 per barrel. 10-year Treasury down slightly. Pre-market futures here vacillating. Vacillating, probably the best way to describe them at this point. And BTC sitting at 34.8 right now.
With us now, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who was deployed to Afghanistan twice. And Colonel, you go back to that warning that Vladimir Putin issued. He's clearly pointing that warning at the United States, saying, don't try it.
Yeah, without question, he is. And that's the reason why just a few days ago, he had a nuclear triad exercise where he...
The trading of the Russian ruble has now been suspended as the currency has been diving. Numerous, hundreds, thousands of vehicles are leaving Russia or Ukrainian cities right now to escape the cities.
I don't think that he's after trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. I think
still have reports of intensive shelling in the east of the country coming from across the border.
Red line that he will fight to prevent. And he proved it in 2008 with Georgia. He proved it in 2014 with Crimea. And even as recently as last December, he was saying, you guys just aren't believing me. I am serious about this. This is a red line. And then when he started building up these forces, he was showing us we had every opportunity to just acknowledge reality, and we should have pulled NATO offer off the table for Ukraine. That could probably have been the one thing that might have prevented this war entirely. But instead, we want to hold with principles and stuff. And now the people of Ukraine are paying for that. But now I'm being very clear. Nobody is responsible for the blood except for Vladimir Putin. Nobody. Right. But we could have mitigated this. We could have.
And, Tulsi Gabbard kind of echoed that, Colonel, if you will. She was saying, maybe somebody should have listened at least.
Somebody in our Discord mentions they have family in Ukraine, looks like outside of potential larger cities here, mentioning that everything is tentatively normal, just that schools are closed.
That close to their country. So, countries are very territorial and they don't want that. So nobody is letting Putin off the hook by any stretch here, Colonel. But what you're saying is that there might have been a pathway to resolve earlier in this diplomatic debate.
100%. I've been saying for months on this network that very thing right there.
I'm going to change channels here for a moment.
Now, Kiev is so close that it's time for, and I hope President Zielinski, now he's declared martial law, get those barricades up, get the civil defense out there, be prepared to fight every street, every block in Kiev. Because if you don't, once those Russian troops get in there, you won't be able to organize that defense. I'm hopeful that the Ukrainian forces will prevent the Russians from ever getting to Kiev. But any sensible military planner would tell you that you might have to have defense in depth. And the final ring of that defense is the defense.
Here is, by the way, a brief video here that we have from Twitter. I will like this so that way you can look at my likes on Twitter. Just follow me at RealMeatKevin. You can check out my likes so you can see them yourself if you want to. Otherwise, I'll just play this now. This looks like a shelling here, and what you're going to see is right here in the middle of the street what looks like an artillery round exploding and shaking the power line. Stand by. Yikes. Popping back over.
Provide assistance to Ukraine to help them stay in the fight. They say they don't need any fighters, but they're certainly going to need support, and the West needs to give them that support. The nations of NATO, the United States, must do this. I hear Mr. Putin's statement, and I will tell you that in his previous exercises, Russia always anticipates a NATO involvement, and Russia plans to use some unconventional weapons, and including a nuclear weapon if necessary, to frighten off NATO. So this is a...
Woo! We don't want to hear about nukes. Nukes to frighten off NATO. Nuh-uh. Here's actually a little bit more from this journalist showing some of the damage of these shellings and the shells.
Standing.
Yep. All right, we're going to pull off this. Hop back over here.
Well, I think the Ukrainians have an excellent defense capacity. They've got a large army, the largest army in Europe outside of Turkey. They're trained. Their officers are pretty good. What they haven't done is they haven't had the opportunity to practice command and control, as we would say, maneuvering forces over large areas. This could be difficult.
Lol. This guy's got to turn off his phone before he gets on here.
Instead, get behind the front line of the Ukraine soldiers and probably destroy their field army in the field, because now that you have a very supplicant Kiev.
Yeah, Lieutenant.
Sorry about that. Not sure what happened there.
Sir.
It was probably Putin.
Well, Russia hit Ukraine with cyber attacks.
So we did get confirmation that NATO allies have agreed to hold an Article 4 consultation on Russia's invasion or incursion, and that Article 4 calls for the consultation over military matters when territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. So it does look like there's some form of agreement here. Biden is apparently in discussions with Congress to pass a new Russia sanctions bill. It looks like the United States House of Representatives are expecting to receive an all-member, unclassified briefing call from Biden administration officials here, probably to help encourage some form of a legislation write-up as soon as possible to properly sanction Russia. Presently, markets clearly reacting to the downside. Dow Jones still down about 2%. S&P down about 2% as well. 2.5% here on the NASDAQ. 2.15 on small cap. Volatility index over about 32 right now. At the same time of these sanctions, we're also seeing pain regarding cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin holding decently, thanks to our sponsor here, FTX, for the TradingView charts, holding decently at around that 34.8 level. It's been bobbing around this 34.8, 35 level. Obviously, this is a substantial drop from where we had been. And if we hop on over to CoinMarketCap, we could just get a quick overview of some of our additional moves here. In the last 7 days, down 20% on BTC, 24% on Ethereum. Cardano, 27%. Solana down 19%. Look at this, folks. Cardano now only at 77 cents. Terra Luna down to 53. Dogecoin at 11. SHIB at 21.85. Polygon, $1.28. Algo, 71. Decentraland, 227. Sandbox, 270. Axie Infinity, this used to trade for 130. 130, 140, now down at 43. This all, of course, in response to Putin's declaration of military operation into Ukraine. We've seen shelling from the north, from the east, air raid sirens throughout Ukraine in various larger cities. We do have the Russian ruble plummeting in value. The Russian stock market has been halted, and trading of the ruble, the currency, has also now been halted. We have martial law in Ukraine, and Biden expected to speak at 12 noon Eastern time tomorrow, though not yet. Let's keep listening in here.
Exactly to Vladimir Putin and that attack these days?
You know, there is through a variety of things. Look, once they find a set of tools that work, they don't go and invent a whole new set of tools each time. Once you find it, you do it. So we're able to track them based on tradecraft, based on the type of software they use. But now, because of the invasion of Ukraine, it's very clear none of this is happening except without the express approval of Vladimir Putin. He is directing his intelligence.
Now, remember, I will be liking any tweets that I bring up here. So in case you're wondering or would like to see the footage for yourself for anything that I showcase here, I will like it so that way you could see it on the history of, if you go to @RealMeatKevin on Twitter. Take a look at this one here. This appears to be a missile landing or hitting a particular airport in Ukraine. Take a look here. Let's see if we can listen to. Yeah. Now, remember that earlier, Donald Trump also came out and condemned Joe Biden for his actions in potentially being asleep in response to the crisis in Ukraine. This again, that missile attack here. Residents presently fleeing the capital as well, as we've seen. Let's pop back on over here. Although this live cam feed seems relatively peaceful.
Knows what they have. So is there a way for them to find just the one computer that's not protected and get in? Probably, but at the same time, again, this is one of those things. They do that to us, we can visit it back to them orders of magnitude more. Why? Because we're not involved in a kinetic war right now. We can bring all of our forces to bear into cyberspace and unleash everything.
Yeah, I wonder if you can answer this question, because a lot of people talk about these sanctions. In fact, they are pivotal, and the president will kind of go over a list of brand new sanctions that he will impose upon Vladimir Putin in the coming days, and the EU will follow suit, and there will be a flood of sanctions on Russia. But you look at North Korea, there's a flood of sanctions on them, still operating, right? You have, young Kim still in power. You look at Iran, still operating. They still have allies helping them. And a lot of people will point to the reasons.
Still have Brent oil just slightly below 102, WTI at about 96.6, both of about 5%.
A lot of these sanctions by manipulating the system in the cyber world. Is that a fair assessment, or is that something that you don't think is actually achievable today?
Well, I don't think the sanctions are going to work. Exactly to your point. Look, we have sanctioned the heck out of Iran, and they're still building nuclear weapons. We sanctioned North Korea. Putin, these will just bounce off him. Sanctions won't do anything to stop what's going on right now. It's just punishment for behavior that's occurring now. But what will it do to deter him in the future? I just don't see that these sanctions will have a material effect, because the other thing, too, is Russia has been increasing their cooperation with China. We might cut them off with the SWIFT system, but there will be some kind of financial relationship between Russia and China. It may cost, maybe like the mob, it may cost Russia some money, but they're not going to be totally excluded, because they've been putting these relationships in place. But every time we've tried to sanction North Korea, then they launch ransomware attacks. Then they do other things. They break into the SWIFT system. I think it was the Bank of Bangladesh, $96 million. So they're very adept at stealing hard currency and money and getting around sanctions.
You mentioned China. We see Russia's the one dropping the bombs.
Okay, Ukraine says enemy forces have seized control of 2 villages in the country's east. Coming through another tweet here. Again, you're welcome to see that. If you go to @RealMeetKevin, you can see those. An apartment complex in Kharkiv has been hit by an airstrike, causing an unknown number of casualties apparently as well. We do have footage of that building. Stand by. Here we go.
Distraction, which means
Doesn't look like we have many more details here. Potentially here, unsure, unable to verify if this is absolutely Russian tanks moving in here. But we have seen numerous video clips of Russian clips or of tanks rolling on streets, although it's always very difficult to tell where they are. Okay, hopping back.
It only takes you only have to hit 1 or 2 and start this cascading series of failures. But the attack on the Colonial Pipeline back in May of last year, they started in April, and then they were in the system. And then in May, they said, hey, we've got your system for ransom. When you look at the way people reacted to a perceived shortage of fuel, there was no fuel shortage. Only in the mind of the consumer was there a shortage. And we had people filling up gas tanks and plastic bags with gas. In fact, I saw a study that came out today, Trace. It was done. It said
another potential angle here of that. Oops, wrong one here. This one here of the after effects of the airport attack here in Ukraine. And looks like there's another from the Lutsk military air base on the Western Front. Again, there we go, this one. So you can see the smoke billowing here in the distance. There it is. Okay.
Paper and paper towels because somebody
For
told
what?
them somewhere that they were not going to get
Right.
any more. And you thought, what's going on? But I get the mentality. People are very, very afraid and aware that something that they use every day could be taken away from them. Morgan Wright, great conversation. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Trace. You bet.
Meantime,
again, reiteration here that the Ukrainian parliament has approved martial law and that Russia says it has destroyed Ukrainian air bases.
In Kiev, and in several hours, President Biden is expected to announce a new round of economic sanctions that Biden calls, quoting here, severe. With us now, former Utah Congressman and Fox.
The Ukraine foreign minister says that the cyber attacks are going on nonstop.
Cyber security expert about them. The question is it doesn't matter how severe they are. We talk about Iran and North Korea. We've got the most severe sanctions in the history of the world on both of these countries, and they're both still operating. And their leaders are still dining in high style while the people suffer on the streets. The question is, will these sanctions, will they have any effect at all in stopping what we're seeing on the ground right now in Kiev and other places around Ukraine?
I think the time to implement sanctions was before Vladimir Putin invaded.
Yeah, no kidding.
Look, when Putin and Russia went into Georgia, there were sanctions, and it obviously didn't deter.
The Italian government has responded. The Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi condemns Russia's attack on Ukraine, saying it is unjustifiable and unjustifiable. Italy stands by the Ukrainian people and institutions in this dramatic moment. We are working with our European and NATO allies to respond immediately with unity and determination. A reiteration here, the Russian Defense Ministry claiming in a statement that its forces have rendered the military infrastructure of Ukraine's air bases inoperable and that the country's air defense systems have been suppressed. The ministry said that Ukrainian border guards do not offer any resistance to Russian units. It has also denied an earlier report that a Russian plane has been shot down over Ukrainian territory.
Who said, listen, these sanctions are meant as a deterrent. Once the bombs have dropped, there's no more deterrent. What are you going to do? You're going to implement sanctions. They're going to take days, weeks, maybe months to grab hold and take effect because they know how to get around them, at least in the short term. And the question is, what happens to Ukraine in those 30 days?
Yeah, there's nothing. These things take years sometimes to be put into place. I don't think it's going to be even a pinprick. I think Putin just laughs about it. I think it is an absolute joke, and it is a pathetic response to one of the most serious invasions we've had.
President of Ukraine here tweeting that the world is with us. Continued negotiations with leaders of the world and have now received support from Qatar.
When you saw the first bombs going off or heard about the first explosions in and around Kiev in the early hours of the morning, your first thought was what, Jason?
Well, there were a lot of experts.
Also, reports now in that the State Department has suspended operations of their consulate in the western region of Ukraine, not just the capital.
A colonel who was on saying, well, he's really not going to do anything with the capital city. But we just had Fox News correspondents with bombs going off in the background. You got pictures of smoke going up in the air. You have the president of the country declaring martial law throughout the country. This is a country that is under attack. It's being invaded. And a lot of people said, oh, no, that Putin isn't going to do this. But I don't see any sign at this point that Putin is going to do anything less than take all the parts of Ukraine. Why would he slow down?
All right, there will be an EU member state emergency summit Thursday evening. Why so late? It's Thursday morning right now. Up to it. Wow.
Go ahead and talk about it, but I think one of the main problems here is that we did not lead out with the world. We did not lead out with all of our NATO partners and broader Europe in being able to say the United States of America is an energy independent organization. We will export our liquid natural gas and other natural products, our gas products to the world. Instead, you had Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saying that global warming was the biggest threat to their livelihoods. I don't think the people of Ukraine feel that global warming is really the big problem right now. It's Vladimir Putin on the march and the people in Taiwan.
It now looks like that 2 villages have been confirmed captured by Russian forces. So this could reiterate what we're seeing with tanks rolling in. Let's go ahead and take a look at these 2 regions here that have been captured. These are 2 villages. This is village number 1, apparently. And you could see on the border here, on this wiki map here, that this is really right on the border. And that this is a town of about 5,000 folks. You do actually have a note here. It was captured by the Russian military. Look at that. It's already listed here on Wiki. Population of around 6,000. Yeah, 5,700 population. And far on the eastern coast here. And this is the other region here. This region looks like it has a population of about 13,300. It was actually occupied by German forces during World War II. Now, let's take a look at where this is. New York Times is reporting that these 2 villages have been captured. It's actually quite far in. I'm surprised by that. I mean, it made sense, the one that was on the border, but not so much the other one so far in. So I'm surprised by that. We'll keep exploring this data here as more of it comes in. Australia says there will be further waves of sanctions. Australia seeks to sanction 300 of Russia's parliament members. And there are now worries that higher energy prices will hamper growth, global growth, and recovery. Russia has suspended navigation in the Sea of Azov, apparently. Belarus president to convene meeting with military. And India says it's prepared to handle the Ukraine situation fallout. I wonder what they're expecting. Germany lashes Russia's, quote, day of shame. Let's listen in more.
Hard to verify. We've already seen some about planes that have been shot down, which we can't verify yet. But I think one claim bears paying attention to, and that is the Russian military's claim that they have knocked out all of Ukraine's air defenses. That would be certainly significant for the battle. In the pre-dawn hour here, we saw a number of explosions around the airport in Kiev here. Those were targeted at command and control centers. It may very well have been some of that air defense system that was taken out. So Russia is claiming at this point, Ukraine's air defense system is gone. The other thing to keep a watch on is Russian troops from the north. Russian troops are battling border guards from Belarus. So right on that northern border, we are seeing tanks move towards this direction. That's the shortest route to the capital. So we're 2 things really to keep an eye on. No air defense system, very likely, and Russian troops now on the move towards the capital from Belarus. The other thing is
that would not be good. If you want to look at another, thank you. Yeah, I do have, actually, it's funny you mentioned map. I just did pull up another map here from B&O. I'm going to like this again so you can follow that hit if you want to just see the tweet here yourself. But this is a substantial progression here. And if it is true what Fox is saying, that there are troops on the move from or to the capital, that is presumably one of the worst case scenarios here, because now we're talking about an occupation. I mean, I don't know what we would expect beyond that at this point, especially with the shelling already of air defenses and airports. Presently, we're seeing BTC at about 34.8, about 34.8 at the moment. And futures taking a little bit more of a hit at the moment. Futures down now 2 1/3 for the S&P and Dow. Small cap down 2.6. Tech down 2.8. Australia's prime minister is holding a news conference. We saw the missile strike on one of the Ukrainian airports. If you did not get to see that, you can we could just watch it right now again. Let's take another quick look at that here. This was that missile strike. You could see this history. There's the missile right into the airport here. All of these tweets that we show, I'll be hearting out of respect for those who posted it, but also so that way you could go to @RealMeKevin on Twitter, just go to the likes section, and you should be able to see the history of everything that I've liked. Just only scroll back the last 2 hours. Don't go any further. Yeah. Oil is now at, unfortunately, 102 on Brent. We have been watching oil here for the last hour, 2 hours here, and we've seen it cross 100. We've seen it cross 101, and we have now seen Brent cross 102, up about 5.5% on this Russian incursion. We also have gold up about 1.6%. Commodity spiking, wheat, soybean, copper, not so much copper, soybeans, coffee, wheat, nickel, and some precious metals. Palladium has been spiking. Bonds down further. Another flight to safety here, so the 10-year yield falling even more. Not uncommon when there's a flight to safety.
After the bombs fall, we need the sanctions now. This was last week, and we need them to be harsh so that at least President Putin can feel the pinch before he makes that final decision. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. The House Foreign Affairs Committee actually proposed a sanctions package that was crippling and would have been much more severe than what the Biden administration initially proposed, and it was rejected by the Democrats. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is, a little bit too late here. We've got this terrible invasion by Putin, which is murderous. We've got unverified reports that are...
Russian military claims it met no resistance from Ukrainian border guards. Now, that could just be a psychological element of warfare here to suggest that... Actually, I would almost guarantee you that's exactly what this update is here. That if Russia says, "Oh, they just threw down their guns at the border," it's like they didn't even try. It's almost as if this would be this psychological attack to suggest that, hey, none of your army folks on the border are trying to defend Ukraine, so why don't you give up as well? Australia announcing the second phase of their sanctions. It is a little surprising that countries haven't been a little bit more aggressive with their sanctions. Someone in the chat here says, an update, Ukraine president says Putin wants to destroy our state. Ukraine's leader does again warn against panic, declares martial law. Oil at 102. Australia says there will be further waves of sanctions. Some of the latest here. Statement also claims that the Russian military had suppressed Ukraine's air defenses. Still TBD on verifying some of these updates here. Lithuanian Prime Minister urged strong and united action. And Ukraine's foreign minister says this is an act of war. Really? Cars head west in Kiev, away from explosions in the east. Also doesn't surprise me. Let's see. Which way do we want to drive? Gosh, it's terrible. Just terrible. Again, we did indicate about 10 minutes ago that Ukraine's Interior Ministry, via the New York Times here, has indicated that 2 villages have been captured by Russian forces in Ukraine. Hong Kong Stock Exchange now down about 3.1%. Nikkei down about, in Japan, down about 2.1%. South Korea down about 2.7%. Oil up again, just over 5%. Let's take a listen here.
Russia is ahead of us. They're setting a stage and a template for future invasions by Russia, by China, into Taiwan, and potentially emboldening our adversaries around the world, just showing how easy it is to just walk in and take over another country by force. This is just something that is going to be very difficult for us to gauge over the next few days, or especially the next steps. But I'm not sure these sanctions may be too little too late at this point, and whether we're going to have to be engaging with some of our troops that are already deployed, at least providing some assistance in Poland and the Baltic states and other areas of Eastern Europe, which I'm certain are very concerned about what's happening tonight, as innocent people are being killed in Ukraine by a murderous dictator, Vladimir Putin.
When you say troop involvement, United States troop involvement, exactly what do you mean in Poland, Congresswoman?
Well, you know, in many ways,
U.S. Embassy in Kiev tells Americans to, quote, shelter in place. The U.S. Embassy in Kiev has issued warnings for Americans in Ukraine to shelter in place due to Russian attacks in a number of major Ukrainian cities. Take the following actions. If you hear loud explosions or sirens activated, immediately seek cover. If in a home or building, go to the lowest level of the structure with the fewest exterior walls, windows, and openings. Gosh, scary. Close any doors and sit near an interior wall away from windows or openings. If you are outdoors, immediately seek cover in a hardened structure. If that is not possible, lie down and cover your head with your hands.
Do something about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which they had green-lighted earlier. You know, energy independence is really important. This is a serious situation we're in. While we're talking about
it's too early to determine how the Federal Reserve will react to this situation. It depends how prolonged this is and how it affects global demand. It certainly does not help to have oil at 102. This could easily add to our inflation woes, easily, and it will.
Serious crisis, and this is going to, again, be a template for other would-be dictators that might be empowered by what Vladimir Putin is doing, and this is just simply diabolical.
Yeah, and that's my next question is, you mentioned China, you talk about President Xi, you know that he is looking at this and he's thinking about Taiwan, and, you know, it's a pickle for the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just concerned that we are projecting weakness. We have a president who should be in front of the world today as the leader.
Bitcoin now down 7%, Ethereum now down 10% just today.
Sanctions immediately. We shouldn't be waiting and
also now reports of tanks and armored personnel carriers heading towards eastern cities within Ukraine.
We have dictators and adversaries around the world who are going to continue to provide, to threaten us. And again, what is the UN? We spend billions of dollars on this organization that is really not giving us more than a bureaucratic response and giving an international stage and credibility to people like Vladimir Putin and the Russians. You know, while the
I can't verify this. If somebody can help me, this is apparently a naval base in Odessa, potentially on fire here. I have not verified this.
And now to a Fox News alert. Air raid sirens heard across Ukraine from the capital of Kiev to Lviv, and Ukraine is now under martial law. Explosions also rocking Ukraine as Russia unleashes a violent and massive military attack. Moscow claims it has knocked out Ukraine's air defenses, and it's only the beginning of what the world has been fearing for months, a full-scale invasion.
Bank of Russia now expected to conduct foreign exchange interventions due to the collapsing of the ruble to levels we have not seen in the last 30 years. Presently, foreign exchange trading for the ruble appears to be halted, as well as the Moscow Stock Exchange, which is actually potentially expected to reopen soon.
Ago, despite the Kremlin's repeated insistence that it was all just a military exercise, those forces lashed out. It began Wednesday with cyber attacks. Then came reports of explosions.
Gas in Europe supposedly now surging 25% as Russia attacks the Ukraine.
Biden vowed the U.S. and its allies will hold Moscow accountable for what he calls an unprovoked and unjustified attack. He's expected to unveil new sanctions he calls severe sanctions against Russia in the coming hours, but it is unlikely threats and deeds can now deter Vladimir Putin from completing his violent mission to proclaim Ukraine Russian territory.
Discussion now that potentially a Ukrainian warplane has been downed in the eastern region.
Failed in a huge way. In the coming hour, we'll be joined again by our team of Fox News correspondents. We have Lucas Tomlinson and Trey Yingst on the ground for us in Kiev. Kevin Cork is standing by in Washington with reaction from our nation's political leaders. And Amy Kellogg will join us from...
Let's see here. Well, it's too difficult to tell. I was hoping to play something, but it's not very clear. Never mind.
We have not seen any Russian jets or any bombers, but clearly this is more than a test. Might even be a warning for the people here. As you mentioned, the Russians are claiming they've taken out all of Ukraine's air defenses. Certainly there are some of those air defense systems in the western part of the country. And right now, these air raid signs are on. One of the things I think it's important that we go back.
Multiple reports now about the prices of gas in Europe now surging 25%. I've seen this multiple times now.
And Russia. I was thinking just before we went on, Trace, is something that was in that letter, 11-page letter that was delivered to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow that said if Putin, if he does not get his way on NATO and these security guarantees, he will be forced to take action. He called them military technical actions. And even though...
Let's go ahead and jump for a moment here. ECB may decide QE end date in March despite the Ukraine crisis.
But said Russian forces are not planning an occupation.
Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, our people should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history.
US President Joe Biden, he condemned what he called the unprovoked and unnecessary Russian invasion. He plans a White House address in the days ahead where he is expected to announce full-scale sanctions on Russia. Mr. Biden tweeting.
Ukrainians were waiting in line for up to an hour to buy fuel, and there were traffic jams on the exit ramps in Kiev, the capital. In the hours after the city's main airport was bombed, Ukrainians have been resolute and refusing to panic. But once the invasion began, grocery stores began filling up with people buying supplies, and many people were waiting in lines to withdraw money from ATMs, per New York Times here. And looks like we have let's see here, another update. Russia has chosen war, says the Prime Minister of Australia, condemning the brutal invasion, unilateral hostile actions, and promising further sanctions. Okay, it does actually look like the Russian stock market in Moscow has opened. Can I just see that if I type in MOEX? Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay. It is down 27% in the past month. And in the past day, it looks like right now we're opening about 11.34% down. I'm not sure if I could see this on Webull. Let's try it. MOEX. Nope. Guess we're stuck with Google. I do think there's a slight delay here on... No, it actually might not be. So we'll keep an eye on this. But this apparently the Moscow Stock Exchange here. Okay, we just broke 3% to the negative on futures here. Stand by. There we go. Look at this. U.S. technology stocks now down 3% via the NASDAQ. S&P and Dow down 2.4% each, with small caps down 2.7%. VIX now up at 33.4%. This is worse at the moment. Bitcoin still sitting at 34.8 though, despite these moves here in futures. We'll pop on over to FTX. Check out the link down below for FTX, sponsor for today's video. All right. Let's bounce for a moment here. Let's see what else we got here. Stand by.
This while we're waiting for the next correspondent to come up, because this is Marsha Blackburn's tweet. She tweeted the following here: "We pray for the people of Ukraine as they defend against Putin's attempt to rebuild the old Soviet Union. Biden must stand up to Putin and immediately levy severe sanctions against Russia, starting with removal from the SWIFT banking system. The USA stands with Ukraine." And that is a big question. Is it enough to do these major sanctions against these banks? Is it enough to have the international community condemn Russia so that these banks will actually help shut down the Russian economy? As we have seen in country after country where these sanctions have been severe, the leaders always end up staying the leaders, right? And
all right, we've got Boris Johnson telling Zielinski the West would not stand by as Russia attacks. And that he was appalled by the attacks. He also tweeted. Let's take a look if we can grab his tweet here. Yeah, Boris Johnson. Here's a statement by Boris Johnson up on screen. Appalled by the unfolding events, the Ukrainian president updated the prime minister on the attacks taking place. And the prime minister said the West would not stand by as President Putin waged his campaign against the Ukrainian people. I mean, I hate to say it, but that it kind of feels like that's what's happening right now. We are now almost, oh my gosh, are you serious? Brent's almost at 103. This is actually delayed 10 minutes here. I just got an update though that the current Brent price, let's see if I can get the current price, is potentially as high as 102.95. So we'll come back in a moment here unless I can find a more up-to-date futures indicator for oil here. Yeah, but this note now suggesting that Brent is up to 102.95.
Is Putin's words, some frightening words from the Russian president, the man who is in charge of this operation. He said, he gave a warning, not just to Ukrainians, but really to the world. He said, don't interfere. If any nation interferes with this operation, the consequences that will be seen have never been seen before in history. So an attack not just against Ukraine, but a warning to the entire world, a menacing warning, consequences never before seen in history. This, as Ukrainians are huddled.
Here's a Twitter feed of this town center square of a town of Sloyansk, which is just north of Donetsk. I'll take a brief peek here. Let's see if we can hear this. No, unfortunately, I have something else playing, so let me close that. There we go. Not exactly sure what's being played on that PA. It almost sounds like an ad. Anyway, we'll come back. Let's see what else is being covered here.
But keep in mind more
Oh, Russian military columns cross Ukrainian border into Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and oh wow, okay, yeah, multiple crossings now by Russian troops supposedly. Let's see if we can get a little bit more detail here.
This was to show once again to the world that Russia is, when it comes to nuclear warheads, the largest power in the world. So it was a dramatic show of force, really, and a warning to other nations to stay out of Ukraine until Russia settles what it thinks is its business here. The words from Putin, though, are extraordinary. He's talking about genocide against Russian people in those separatist areas, and he's talking about fighting against denazification. So this guy is talking about Nazis and genocide. Though that's the language being used. When you're talking about Nazis and genocide, you're not talking about a minor incursion. This is a major battle with cities now.
Looks like Kharkiv could end up being the first extremely large, second largest city in Ukraine, preparing to move in here. This appears to be unverified footage here of some vehicles and Russian troops on their way into the city here.
I don't think anyone said no to him.
Remember, if you want to see these, I'm going to be liking these tweets so that way you could see them in my feed at RealMeKevin on Twitter.
So we'll see where it goes from here. The other thing to keep an eye on is forces from Belarus. Ukrainian border guards have reported fighting with those forces. More than 30,000 Russian forces in the north from Belarus, and they are moving south. That's the quickest way to the capital, and that's the convoy to keep an eye on.
Here's another potential image here of Russian troops moving into Kharkiv. Looks like we've got a couple tanks here, potentially 3, and multiple troops blocking the street. I mean, if that's not a sign of blocking the streets, I don't know what is. Jeez.
Anybody in the world.
German government now reporting that, quote, combat operations and rocket attacks are taking place in Ukraine. German nationals are urgently requested to leave the country. If you cannot leave the country safely, stay in place for the time being.
Still have their nuclear weapons. If we'd be in this position today, Fred, what do you think?
I think that's an excellent point, and it's going to have an effect on various efforts to stop nuclear weapons programs. It's going to make it harder to convince the North Koreans to give up their nuclear weapons, and it's going to encourage the Iranians to continue their sprint to get nuclear weapons. We made some kind of promise towards the Ukrainians. I don't think it was spelled out as you said, and now we are where we are, and I think the Ukrainians wish they hadn't given up those weapons.
And I wonder if
Here's a tweet from Mariupol. Probably messing up the pronunciation, but I'm doing my best. This is just showing long lines at an ATM for individuals to withdraw cash as they potentially suspect the shutdown of Ukrainian banking systems as a Russian occupation appears imminent for many cities. NASDAQ futures now down 3%. We'll take an updated look here at oil. Still not seeing that 103 that I did see an alert on, sitting right now at 102.3. But again, 10 minutes dated here, still up 5.6%.
True. Those tanks are on the way to Kiev. And I think this is a good point, that the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian army, may feel a little overconfident. But on the other hand, I think in trying to take Kiev, the Russians will suffer some pretty significant casualties. It's hard to take cities. There will be many well-armed troops in that region. So we have to calculate what exactly is the objective of this operation.
Aluminum prices are skyrocketing on this incursion. Russian-backed separatists are now claiming they have downed 2 Ukrainian drones.
What if President Zielinski says, okay, listen, we're going to take NATO off the table in this thing. We don't want to be it. We want you to pull your troops out tomorrow. Would that be enough? I mean, you look at what's happening here, and I think the last thing, as we've talked about with some other people,
South Korea to join sanctions against Russia.
Afghanistan, like in '88, doesn't want to get bogged down in Iraq, like we have seen, where these guerrilla warfare scenarios go on for months and months and sometimes years and years.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry says, don't worry, this Ukrainian crisis is not an invasion described by some foreign military or media, rather. Okay, China. Okay, China. Let me guess. Let me guess a couple of other things, because obviously what we're seeing is not an invasion of Ukraine, China. Let me guess something else. Let me guess. The real estate market is going to be fine in China, right? And your regulation of Alibaba and tech companies isn't to try to bankrupt them, right? And your economy is seeing inflation go down, not at all having to do with your price curbs on goods and services, but because inflation just happens to be going down, right? That's what's happening, right, China? Can't believe any of this.
Remember that Putin installed a puppet government which was overthrown because of popular protests in 2014. If he puts another puppet government in, there's every chance that in a few years that will happen again. So, you know, sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for. Putin may be able to seize control of Ukraine, seize control of the capital, overthrow the government. But what happens then? The Ukrainian people are not going to stand for being occupied by this Russian army, which is probably not large enough to resist what will be a rather aggressive insurgency.
If we were, for the sake of argument, and it might be a bridge too far, if we were, Fred, to take Russia at its word, and they were...
This is an interesting quote. Every U.S. recession since 1971 has been preceded by 2 things. Number 1, an oil price shock. Number 2, an increase in the Fed funds rate. Nah, couldn't potentially have both of those happening right now, could we? Oh, wait.
Not trust them, and they go to war.
Well, I thought at the beginning of the evening that Putin just wanted Donetsk and Luhansk, and this was all an effort to knock out any Ukrainian troops that would stop the Russians from taking full control of these provinces. And I assume that after Putin did that, sometime in the future, there would be wider invasions. I didn't think there'd be a wide invasion of the entire country like this.
Okay, Russian military vehicles enter Ukraine now from Crimea, which is from the south. According to a video released by the Ukrainian border guard, it is unclear which border crossing the vehicles entered the Ukraine from the east or the west. But the Belarus earlier we did also apparently have evidence here of troops, a column of troops and military vehicles crossing from the north, from Belarus into Ukraine. Aye. All right.
Would support that or would say that's not going to happen?
No, the international community would never accept that. It's really a disaster for the international system. But it's worth noting, as we talk now, how
unlikely now that the Nord Stream 2 will go online in the medium term. Okay, medium term is a big deal. Medium term generally means 6 to 18 months. That is not good for oil prices, and high oil prices. If demand stays high, high oil prices will lead to more inflation.
For revealing intelligence that, hey, Putin's going to launch a false flag operation. Our intelligence knows when he's invading. This was such a ridiculous response, and I think it just emboldened Putin to go ahead with this invasion. We need to have a reset of American national security policy after this disaster.
What next then? If you're President Biden, or if you were giving him guidance, what next for him? I mean, does he go forward with the sanctions, or is there something else that he needs to have up his sleeve?
Right.
We have to sanction. First of all, U.S. troops.
Well,
are
yeah,
not
but
going
come on, we got to do more than sanctions at this point. But what? What else do you do?
America involved in more unnecessary wars. There should have been maximum sanctions a year ago. We should never have dropped the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Biden has been appeasing Putin for the last year. He's let Putin know there's opportunities now he would never have had under a strong and decisive American president. Biden needs to clean house. He needs to fill his national security positions with men and women of gravitas and sense, people like Jim Baker. I mean, as someone who would be like Jim Baker, I would bring in Jane Harman, maybe Bob Gates, maybe Leon Panetta, senior statesmen who can help reset our national security policy, give Biden good advice to stop him from making bad decisions and to stand up to these dictators who are really going to be on the rampage, I'm afraid, after this catastrophe.
Yeah, there were so many bad decisions made in Afghanistan, and you wonder if those are going to kind of overlap.
NASDAQ 100 futures point to first bear market since March of 2020. Futures tracking the NASDAQ 100 index signaled the U.S. equity gauge is poised to fall into a bear market on Thursday for the first time since the depths of the pandemic sell-off. March futures for the tech-heavy index slid as much as 3.3% as Russian forces attacked targets across Ukraine. Diplomacy has failed. Wow. The NASDAQ 100 is down about 18% since hitting its high on November 19th.
Airports are closing. People are nervous about how they are going to get out of here when they eventually do have plans to go abroad.
And my gosh. Brent now at 103.09. I mean, it's at this point, it's just skyrocketing. 103.09. I know that seems relatively slow, but we do also continue to look at it. But skyrocketing might be like 120 or whatever. But we're kind of on that path right now. I mean, we're almost WTI 100. This is nuts. Yeah.
And then, according to these journalists, he had a phone call with the Turkish president and then has a meeting with the Pakistani prime minister later today. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of things going on, many of them seeming sort of detached from what is going on in Ukraine, which is the most important thing, an earth-changing and universe-changing event. We've been talking about what Putin said earlier today, which was really a message that he wanted to change the world order, change the world as we see it, feeling aggrieved for not being part of the Western camp.
Bitcoin, by the way, quite stable right now at 34.7 to 34.8.
Russia's, but the whole world's security was at risk with America sort of marching through and being the only world power.
Yeah, Dow futures now down 848 points.
Terrorism. And then those words about wanting to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine were very alarming here because there is a sense that has been fabricated by many people here as well. Of course, the state propaganda and state TV has been building this case for a long time now, but Russians and Ukrainians fought side by side against the Nazis in World War II, and President Zielinski himself is Jewish, so it doesn't make sense. Zielinski, in a
pull off Zielinski here. Former U.S. ambassador to Russia and professor at Stanford University says nations should also impose sanctions on Belarus, whose pro-Moscow government has allowed Russian troops to invade Ukraine from inside its borders. Belarus must be part of the sanctions package. Yeah, I doubt that's going to happen. But not a bad point.
Russians now, some of them dissidents in opposition and in exile, some of them with independent media And organizations, non-governmental organizations, are sort of encouraging Russians to speak out against what their president is doing. And so far, we haven't seen a sign of that. We know that any such protest would be put down very quickly. I saw on social media a notice that there was a picket going on in Belarus against war, and I looked to see the picture trace. It was just a poster someone had put in their window.
Oh my gosh. So we originally looked at the stock market in Russia, and we saw it was opening about 11 to 13% down. Folks, we now have an update on the stock market in Russia. It is down 27%. This is the MOEX, the Moscow Stock Exchange. This comes at the same time as we're receiving updates that Ukraine is now confirming that the Russian army has crossed the state border in 4 different regions. Russian MOEX now down 26.6%. U.S. futures also down substantially. U.S. futures, oh, that camera's dead. Down 852 points, 2.59% on the Dow, 2.66% on the S&P, 3.4% on the S&P 500, and 2.86 on the small cap index. Yikes.
The Soviet Union and a repressive regime, then segueing into what should have been a democratic world. Now they're feeling that they're being dragged back in time, and it just doesn't make sense. This is a city, Moscow is of course different from the rest of Russia in the way that New York and Los Angeles perhaps are different from the rest of the United States, but it's a booming city, it's a clean city, it's a thriving city on many levels, and the fear is that that could change very soon. And the thought is, why do we need this? We don't want Ukraine. We want to be friends with Ukraine. We don't want a war. We don't want to hear about body bags. And we don't want our lifestyle being limited by any new restrictions. We don't want to be ostracized by the rest of the...
for a second here to CNN.
That Russian forces in that advance could then meet up with Russian forces based in Transnistria in Moldova. And certainly that would then seal off the entire Ukraine.
Let's try over here.
A great deal of pain suffered by the people could, in fact, over time, make his position extremely difficult. But his strongest allies inside the country, his biggest supporters, his most important constituency, at least over the short period of time, are the people who he's elevated to the top of the food chain, who receive the largest percentage of gratuities. His inner circle, oligarchs.
This is for potentially other sanctions. President of France now saying on Twitter that France firmly condemns Russia's decision to wage war against Ukraine, and that Russia must immediately put an end to all military operations.
His perception is that the people, the large body of Russians, can withstand a great deal of pain. It's easy, I guess, to be condescending about Russians, but difficulties, pain, sacrifice is not alien to Russia. They've gone through a great deal of difficulty over their long history, particularly in the Second World War. So I think the perception, particularly among Putin and his cronies, is that the Russian people can absorb a great deal of pain, and I think he's willing to subject them to it in order to achieve his objectives. No matter how irrational they seem to us, they're rational to him. Katie.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to pull up that video that we just had on air a moment ago. This is, I believe, from Kharkiv earlier this morning, and it shows a number of blasts, rapid fire blasts in the distance. That's from earlier in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk to a member of the House Armed Services Committee as we watch the unfolding invasion in Ukraine.
Jeez. All right. They're all going on commercial at the same time.
Thank you very much, Trace. I wouldn't believe that. I think if they're trying to knock out air
systems to basically create air superiority. It's going to take.
Still, by the way, sitting at 103 on Brent, substantially above $100 here. Okay, oh my gosh, the Russian stock exchange, the MOEX, the Moscow Stock Exchange, now reporting down 30%. If I go back down to a 5-year average and I look at the pandemic low, the pandemic low was about 90. Okay, and now it's sitting at 82. Again, going to the 1 day here, showing this at seems to be recovering a slight bit here. We got some buy the dippers over there. Now about 29.7% to the downside. Wow. Okay.
Be thrown into the mix during the Truman presidency, when the Soviet influence was really taking hold in Greece and Turkey. We came up with the Truman Doctrine. We looked at stability in Europe, the Marshall Plan, et cetera. It needs to be a overall focus on readiness in the United States, building our military capability, creating energy independence for the United States, strengthening the United States, allowing Congress to do its role with regard to strengthen sanctions. I also think the American people need to see things other than bank sanctions. For example, President Reagan, when the incursions occurred in Poland, basically denied operations by Aeroflot, the Russian airlines. Well, if you look at Aeroflot now, with their hubs in New York and in Washington, D.C. and Miami, it gives them access to the United States. It gives them access to the oligarchs in the United States, as well as the Americas.
Oh, okay, this is interesting. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense said Thursday that forces are countering the Russian offensive with dignity, inflicting losses on Moscow troops. National Defense Forces using the right for self-defense, according to Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, are countering with dignity the enemy's attempts to break through the state border. The situation is controlled. Russian troops are suffering losses. TBD on the accuracy of these claims, but you've also got quite substantial traffic leaving cities. Talk of Russian military tanks moving in, certain towns already being taken over. Keep listening here.
So that we can show solidarity for the people of Ukraine, while at the same time strengthening the deterrent posture for any future type of mischief that Putin would do outside of Ukraine.
You know, you listen to people, and some of the intel experts will tell you that, if this is an all-out battle, that we're talking about anywhere from 100 to 125,000 civilians in Ukraine killed. You're talking about 25 to 50,000 military personnel killed. You're talking about upwards of 1 million refugees flooding across the border into Poland and some other countries. And I'm wondering, to those who say that this is an unwinnable battle for the Ukrainians, what would you say, Captain?
I disagree. In fact, I know many Ukrainian officers up to the 3-star level, and I looked at their service during the 2014 incursion with Crimea, also in Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine has a special forces, many special forces officers and leaders that are very, very capable. As you mentioned previously, there are the Javelin missiles that are there against could be used against the tanks. There's also the strength and the will of the Ukrainian ground forces, armed forces themselves. Many of them trained in.
By the way, this fall of about 30% on the MOEX is the most on record that we have seen.
So I think the will of the Ukrainian people won't be seen as people that are weak, but they're very strong. And I think looking at the lines of effort that the Russians are pursuing now, as you mentioned through the report, with the sounds of armament in Kiev, as well as the movement of tanks across the Belarusian border, that says that we'll see how far that they're able to go. We'll see.
Let's take a listen to some video here.
First of all, where Russian airstrikes will hit, but secondly, how do the Ukrainians react? Will we see a massive procession of people heading towards the western part of the country and Poland? And what does that mean for Poland and the rest of the European Union? Poland has already made preparations to receive war wounded and refugees. It's likely it will have to activate those plans now. In fact, it's guaranteed Poland will have to activate those plans now. So just how many people will try to get out of the areas and cities that Russia is likely to target? That's, I think, what we should be looking at today. And of course, the sad reality, the tragic reality is that we have to start counting the number of people killed in these various Russian strikes.
Ukraine says the Russian army has crossed the state in 4 regions, and they previously talked about 5 regions and Crimea, which of course Russia occupied in 2014, where they are seeing attacks from. So that's the latest on what we're hearing from the Ukrainian side.
We're going to go and pull off here. Let's see what else we can find.
Air capability that could be mobile that the Ukrainians could use. I just think they have to hold their ground in order for the Russians to basically be brought to a stalemate and not have regime change, not have President Zielinski and his government leave power and leave Kiev. I think they'll stay there until
BTC now around 34.4.
So much for coming on, sir. We very much appreciate it. And we lost him. Thank you, sir. Ukrainian President Zielinski has reached out to President Biden asking for the U.S. president to denounce the invasion. And the president, Biden, will meet with G7 leaders tomorrow to talk about the next step for the U.S. and its allies. Let's go to Fox News correspondent Kevin Cork. He's live in D.C. with more on this. Kevin, good morning to you.
Yeah, Trace, good morning. It's been very interesting watching all the changes happen late into the evening and now early into the morning here in Washington. As you pointed out, Joe Biden did speak with Ukraine's President Zielinski by phone, during which the U.S. leader called Russia's military activities there unprovoked and unjustified. Biden pledging that the U.S. and allies will coordinate their responses in a, quote, united and decisive fashion, including more severe sanctions, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. Speaking
we've talked about these sanctions. Let's quickly look at the updated map. Folks, the map is getting ridiculous. It's almost every part of Ukraine that has been hit with something. Certainly with something here. Thank you, by the way, Tara, for the $19 donation twice. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it does feel like Bitcoin is more stable than our stock futures at the moment. But I guess we'll see tomorrow when we actually have stocks open. Let's listen in.
Still reserve or retain some of the chances to have more, say again, carrots for later on if you want to entice the Russians in another direction. Unfortunately for this White House, Trace, they have seen throughout this night and throughout the time that Joe Biden has been in office, there's been a total disregard for his leadership by the Russian leadership, especially as it is related to Ukraine. And so now we're seeing the fruit of that disdain and that disregard. We will see if a collective effort by world powers will be enough ultimately to slow down Vladimir Putin. Of course, we'll all be watching throughout the night and throughout the days and weeks ahead, Trace.
We will. And I'm curious, Kevin, you talk about carrots and sticks, and, you know, even those who are really good at these sanctions and can kind of tell you exactly what they do and go after will tell you that the stick takes a while for someone to feel the pain. So these sanctions.
It's also possible now that the MOEX has been halted down about 30%. That's the Moscow Stock Exchange again, down substantially.
feeling inside the White House right now.
Yeah, you nailed it. And in particular, when you think about a person who is as well positioned as Vladimir Putin is, not just his personal financial fortune, but we're talking about having friends in wealthy places like the Chinese, for example, and the Iranians and others and the Belarusians. So in his case, he can withstand this, and I'm sure he has gamed this out. I listened to Morgan earlier and Fred and other guests that you've had here tonight, and I think they've laid out a scenario, Trace, whereby Vladimir Putin has not only planned for the sanctions, he knows that he can wait them out for a while. But I think the real question is, how much can the collective powers around the globe finally come together? We've seen what the Germans...
Yeah, that's the big question. We don't actually think much. I mean, what are we going to get? More economic sanctions? I mean, I don't know how much Russia cares right now. They benefit off the increasing price of crude substantially. Now we're at, wow. I mean, look at this. We are at now 103.50. We're almost up 7% on oil. Holy smokes. That's 4% more than when we started streaming.
Because a lot of people would say, listen, including the president of Ukraine, if you had put these sanctions in place when we asked a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, even a month ago, when they first started massing those troops along the border with Ukraine, now they'd start to bite. Now they'd be biting a little bit. And I'm wondering if the president thinks, man, we should have put them in. So at least now that there would be some kind of, because, you know, we talked with Amy Kellogg about this, about whether diplomacy was really ever on the table.
It is now being confirmed that the Ivano-Frankivsk airport has been destroyed by enemy missiles.
And the question would be,
which we saw video of.
A lot of smart people in this administration must have said, raised their hand and said, hey, these sanctions need to go in place yesterday.
This is exactly, Trace, what will come out in the days ahead, in particular as people here in Washington. You know, there's always lots of hand-wringing. There's lots of predictions, and most of them are wrong. But sometimes you make a prediction of what will happen, and you turn out to be correct. And unfortunately for this White House, there were those voices that said, hey, listen, we need to act strongly. We need to act now. You heard Fred Fleiss in particular talking about how important it was to really hit them early on. And by the way, we listened to some Ukrainian officials earlier tonight in a conversation with Shannon Bremen also.
Let's see. Vietnam now urging restraint in Ukraine, calling for diplomacy. BTC just moved up again a little bit. We got a little bit of actually a potential gap up here. Let's see here. Slight recovery. Yeah, there we go. 34.8 right now. Taking a look at our FTX chart here. 34.8, a little bit of a recovery. Dow futures now down about 815 points, no longer that full 850 that we saw just about 20 minutes ago.
To deter.
Precisely.
Really tough to deter somebody when they've dropped the bombs already. Kevin Corke, back to you as the news breaks. Thank you, sir. Joining us now, Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. And Joel, to you, the same question, because really this is the question of the day. The president's going to come out later this afternoon and he's going to say these sanctions are going to be in place. They are going to be harsh. They're going to be biting. We're going to go maybe right to the head of the snake and go after Putin himself. Who knows exactly what they're going to hit him with hard. The question is, had you hit him a month ago with these things, they would now be starting to take effect. They would now start to feel the pinch a little bit more. And maybe my assessment is way off, but I'm asking for your guidance here.
Yeah, Trace, no, this is the right question to ask. It's how do we deal with the madman with nuclear weapons who seems hell-bent on invading a neighbor that hasn't done anything to provoke him other than existing? And I think that it's very hard to navigate this, and what the administration has been trying to do, and I think this has been the approach that we've seen working, is make sure we have unity with our allies, make sure that we have partners in this program.
Yeah, let's see. U.S. mission to NATO has posted a statement on Twitter. The U.S. and NATO allies condemn in the strongest possible terms Russia's attack on Ukraine. We've been coordinating with our allies to prepare for this moment, and we are ready to respond. Yeah, how about you do something? Mayor of Kiev, the former heavyweight, who's this? Former heavyweight boxing champion, appeared on Ukrainian television to assure residents of 2.8 million that shops were open Banks were banks were working, and the gas station had fuel. Don't panic, he says. Stay at home. I don't know. I mean, who would listen to that? I'm just curious. Like, wouldn't you? I mean, maybe you would have already gotten your money from the bank. Wild. Let's listen to
that I have is, what happens if these sanctions are put in place tomorrow and President Putin decides that he wants to kind of turn the spigot on Nord Stream 1 down a little bit, down a few notches, and limit the amount of energy, of natural gas that goes into Germany? They're already in an energy crisis in Europe. That would not help, and it could put their feet to the fire.
Trace, it's a perfect question, and it's also a very good explanation for why it's excellent to not have Nord Stream 2 going online. It reduces the ability of Russia to extort Europe down the road. But if they do go to extortion, they're going to cut their revenue. That's going to be one critical thing. And then, quite frankly,
futures settling down a little bit in terms of the pain that we had seen. Now the Dow has recovered about 100 points. Take a look here. You can see above my head, we've got Dow now down 727 points at 2.19. S&P 500 down 2.2. Tech still down 2.85, but off of that 3.3 that we saw. Small caps down 2.28. European gas now jumping 41%. And international oil up about 7%, with Brent and WTI both up substantially. All right.
And so he is operating in a different state of mind right now from anything that we've seen. And we have to be very clear that this is a threat to us as well as to Ukraine.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, listen, the use of nuclear weapons is a game changer, and that would change the whole calibration of NATO, and everything else would go out the window, and it would change. I want to give you a couple of headlines, if I can here, Joel, because these are things that you're going to read tomorrow morning in your papers. Crude oil tops $100 per barrel. This is after...
old news. We're like 103 right now.
Reporting, quote, natural gas prices rose around the world after the invasion by Russia, the single biggest exporter of the fossil fuel globally. That's Russia. Europe experienced the sharpest rally. Futures for gas delivered in the Netherlands, the benchmark in Northwest Europe, jumped 30% in early trading. That's early, and the markets haven't even opened, right? You're thinking, well, maybe you have, They have there 30% in early trading, the equivalent of $129 a megawatt hour. In New York, U.S. gas prices rose 6%, and in New York, it's $2.47 in the morning. And at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, there's some bets that those gas prices could be up 10%, Joel.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is horrible. It's horrible for the Ukrainian people, first and foremost. It's horrible that civilians in cities are getting bombarded
Here's a video also to be verified. It's a little choppy, but it shows this here. And I'm going to like this again so you can see my like history, but just some potential military troops here and tanks moving in. And the bottom, you're going to see a heavy flamethrower come up when I replay this at the beginning here. It's a TOS-1. Here we go. This is considered a heavy flamethrower system. It is a multiple rocket launcher weapon on a T-72 tank chassis. It's designed to attack enemy fortified positions and lightly armored vehicles, especially in open terrain. Yikes. Usually about 24 barrels. And they shoot fast. Aye. What a mess.
Years with the Russians on diplomacy, on strategic stability, nuclear weapons, arms control. There have been periods going back to President Bush in 2001 saying he looked into Vladimir looked into Putin's eyes. This has been a conundrum for multiple presidents to figure this guy out. And we're going to probably have to have more diplomacy with him down the road as well. But at this moment, he is a pariah. He is isolated internationally. And he's dug a real hole for himself in terms of anyone wanting to talk to him in the future and trusting his diplomatic word. We have had agreements in the past on nuclear weapons in particular. Those are crucial to our security. But he is...
yeah, nukes are the really no-go zone. Some notes here from Reuters Global Market Forum that the EU is saying the following, quote, "We will target strategic sectors of the Russian economy by blocking their access to key technologies and markets. We will weaken Russia's economic base and its capacity to modernize." Future slipping a little bit again right now after this this update here about 8 minutes ago on these new potential sanctions. It does look like futures are quite reactive to sanctions, as it's uncertain exactly how these sanctions might impact our stock market or potentially corporations providing services. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. The odds now of a 50 basis point hike from the Federal Reserve are actually declining. They've now fallen as low as 13% after being as high as 38% yesterday. And right now it appears that as a fear asset, gold is kicking Bitcoin's butt. And nobody likes to hear that. Unless you're in gold. All right.
Boy, let's say. I guess we will begin first with Congressman. And because, you know, he's the only man on the panel, so we need to start with him first. I'm wondering what your initial reaction would be from what you have seen tonight. You've had about 4 hours to kind of get through.
Okay. Did he just say we're going to start with the congressman first because he's the only man on the panel? I feel like that was disconnected from what he meant, because I think he said we're going to start with congressman and then kind of reiterated the person's name. And it's kind of like, because he's the only guy. But it kind of came across as like, well, we're going to start with the man because he's the only man here. That didn't sound good. I think it was the former that I described, but what I heard did not sound good. Anyway. So Brent here at 103. Still holding on to that 103, and Dow, S&P, or NASDAQ really vacillating around that negative 3% range here. Looking at gold up now about 1.66%. That's been relatively stable. 10-year Treasury pretty stable here as well. All right, let's hop on and let's see what commentary we get here.
Is, will Biden help Ukraine fight off Russia? What Putin wants to do is to make this as smooth as possible. So the first 12 to 24 hours, very critical as he'll go after command and control targets. There's still a lot the U.S. and NATO can do to help Ukraine, providing military intelligence, location of Russian forces, even some air power and surveillance. They have got to decide if they're going to help Ukraine fight, and it is going to be ugly to watch.
It is going to be ugly to watch. And I'm wondering, Rebecca Heinrich, is that really the answer? You're going to have to do more. You have to watch Ukraine fight this battle. And that is going to be heartrending for people around the world, because this could go on for a long time. And it is clearly, at least from the outside looking in, a mismatch.
Yes, there's three things that we really need to do. The first is this idea that we're...
By the way, continued reiteration here that the Russian armed forces are not to strike citizens.
Now you give full bore sanctions. Watch the ruble go through the floor. Really lay on the pain, and then you can offer to take the pain off once Putin decides to lay off or to have more restricted aims. And then you're going to see, hopefully, the Russian people come out in the streets because they're going to feel the pain. That needs to be the strategy now. So they need to flip it. The other thing, we need to have a Russian military support to the bolts in the polls. That's going to inspire and give greater confidence to the Ukrainians. And it's also
numerous updates now from the Ukrainian government that banks are operating. Seems like there's a lot of potential panic, maybe even fears of a bank run forming. I don't expect it would get to this sort of level, but we're seeing this a lot. And also talk about there being no restrictions on foreign exchange transactions in Ukraine right now.
Back off. We don't want nuclear employment. We don't want it at all. And so we need to be shoring up deterrence because this is a very serious situation. In the fog of war, it can spin out of control.
Yeah, but Congressman Fitzpatrick, she talks about laying on the pain. We've just kind of established it takes a while to lay on the pain. I mean, this could have been
danger here now of a food inflation skyrocketing after wheat, palm oil, and other sectors skyrocket. Okay, Ukraine has just suspended its foreign exchange market. Okay, that came shortly after the other update saying everything was fine.
But we still ought to be giving them everything that they need. And by the way, Trace, we've given them a lot of anti-tank, but no anti-aircraft, no anti-missile defense systems. And look what you're seeing now. They're claiming that they've taken out Ukraine's air defense system. This is a problem. This is why they were asking for Stingers a long time ago. It's why they were asking for Patriot missiles. They've received very little, or if any. They got no Patriots, and they got very few Stingers, and they got them late. But it's important to remember, Trace, and I think Rebecca's spot on. Over half of the Ukrainian population.
Okay, now they're going to limit bank withdrawals in Ukraine. That's going to freak people out to a certain amount per day.
Russia may be able to take Kiev. They're not going to be able to hold Kiev or hold Ukraine. It's going to be very ugly. That's really what we're about to see unfold here. And I pray that President Biden is strong.
It looks like, oh my gosh, it looks like the limit is going to be $339 per day for bank withdrawals. That's pretty low. Pretty low. Now limiting cash withdrawals. And some individuals in Ukraine are saying that many are not working and that some have long lines. Some people are robbing people as they're trying to go get money from ATMs now. It's terrible. See, this is why we need crypto.
Ready to fight. And I think it's a crucial choice now for the U.S. and NATO to help Ukraine fight Russia. We're in a whole new world. And thank heavens, we do have our F-35s in Germany. Those are nuclear capable aircraft. We do have tactical nuclear weapons available in Europe to maintain deterrence there. That's ever so much more important. And we've got to be ready and buttoned up in case of a cyber attack that extends beyond Ukraine and reaches to the U.S. or to our NATO allies.
Yeah, and Rebecca Heinrich, I mean, it's a great point because, you look at the chessboard going on over there right now, and the last thing Vladimir Putin wants, I'm sure.
We're now expecting the full package of American sanctions to come tomorrow.
Ukrainians, just Dr. Graham said, this is not even the Ukrainian military that we saw in 2015. It's even more disciplined. It's more unified. It's better trained, stronger sense of Ukrainian identity. This is going to be a tough military. They're brave, they're outgunned, they're outmanned, but they've got lots of courage, lots of heart. They're going to push through. They're going to defend their country, defend their families. And it's our responsibility to just keep giving them the weapons to do that. But again, I just want to put a caution on that. When we do that, we are getting involved. And I think we should do it. But we need to make sure that we are communicating very crystal clear to Vladimir Putin that he better keep his aims more mild. He better not spread them. There was reporting that he was getting kind of near the Polish border. He's got to back away from that Polish border or we're going to have a major, major problem. All of this is meant to de-escalate, of course, and get us back to a place of peace. Ukrainians are not the ones who did anything wrong here. This was not NATO expansion that did this. This is all on Vladimir Putin and his expansionist aims. He's been telling us what he wants to do for years. We just haven't been listening.
I got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, Victor, would love to hear more from you. We're Victor here shouting out that we are far from supply chain issues being resolved I deal with logistics in Tacoma. Situation is way critical than you see from normal news feeds. Wow, would love to know a little bit more. Yeah, send us some more details. Thanks, Tara. And thank you. Shout out to those of you who are members of the live stream chat here. Keep in mind, every day the market opens up, I do a course member live stream. If you want to join those, if you have not had a chance to check those out yet, check out the newest course, the Wealth Path. That one's still in development, though. You can always check out the others, too, though. Stocks and Psychology of Money, Real Estate Investing, Do-It-Yourself Property Management, and more. Let's take a look at what else we have here.
Russians in Ukraine.
And we have to go.
Okay, here's a large, this is an unverified explosion here. I don't know if this is accurate, but I'm going to show this here. This looks like it is an explosion at a potential military. What is this? We'll try to find out where here. Here we go. Military depot in this particular region here. I'm just not going to even try. Let me see if I can find it out myself where it is. Here we go. That's central Ukraine. That's right in the middle of Ukraine here. And that looks quite substantial. So I'm going to heart this again. If you want to see a history of what I've hearted, all these videos here related, just follow me on Twitter at RealMeetKevin. And then you can look at my profile and the like history. Oh, this is incredible. All right, let's keep listening in here. Okay, we do also, again, have futures here on tech down about 3.11% and Dow back to being down about 840 points.
Russian military vehicles and warplanes. And later this morning, President Biden is expected to unveil what the White House described.
Okay, more explosions now being heard in the eastern city of Kiev.
Threats and deeds have failed to deter Vladimir Putin from launching a bloody campaign to seize Ukraine on his own. It is an ever-escalating conflict that efforts of diplomacy by the international community have failed so far to resolve.
Gosh, somebody wants to know who wins in a debate, U.S. versus Russia and U.S. versus China in a nuclear war. Well, obviously the U.S., but nobody wants to talk about that. I don't think that's oh, look at this. Bank of Russia temporarily bans short selling as the MOEX crashes. Short selling getting banned, still down 30% on the Moscow Stock Exchange.
Stay in their homes. If you take a look at what's going on, not everyone's listening to that. Some people are still out and driving. Other people are huddled in the subway. There was bombing in the pre-dawn hours, and there were more attacks within the past hour. We could hear a sort of rumbling in the distance. It's a foggy, cloudy day here, so you could just hear sort of muffled like thunder in the distance. There have been no reports of mass casualties from any of those attacks. Russia is saying it's using precision weapons and that they're not targeting civilians. It's likely they're targeting air defense systems. Russia is saying it has knocked out the entire...
Oh, the question was nuclear. Sorry, I misread that. U.S. versus Russia, U.S. versus China. Well, of course, still the U.S. But yeah, I mean, both of those would be terrible. Terrible bloodbaths. Anyway, MOEX index now potentially down as much as 35% as Russia bans short selling of their stock exchange.
Hours long. People are buying groceries. People are trying to get money out of the bank. They are fleeing. Other people, though, are in their basements. They're in the subway system here. It's 37.
Gosh, look at that traffic for people trying to leave on the left.
People are scared about what could happen, so they're taking shelter where they can. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced an operation in eastern Ukraine, but it's clear the facts on the ground go far beyond that. The nation of Ukraine is being attacked on all fronts, from the north, from the east, and from the south. The most worrisome prospect at this time is Russian forces from the north, from Belarus, across that border. More than 30,000 Russian forces there are on the move. They've been battling Ukrainian border guards. They are headed this way towards the capital city.
Oil now stabilizing slightly at 102, slightly down a little bit.
Siege operation. It seems likely that with the extent and the...
Okay, European stock markets just opened. Germany down 4.8%, France down 4.4%, UK down 3.1%, and Italy down 4.3%.
That's what we expect. Trace?
Yeah, and as you were on the screen, Steve, we had live pictures, 10:04 a.m., the traffic you were talking about coming west out of Kiev. It looks extensive. It is bumper to bumper, and it looks like it will take a very long time to get these people to where they are going. We're not saying all of them are fleeing, but clearly some of them are. And I'm wondering if you know, if you've heard it all, Steve, and I don't want to pin you in on this, but do you know if there are any policies in places like Poland on what they would do? Would they allow these people to come in? Are they allowing refugees to come across the border? Do we know any of that, and has that been talked about?
It has been talked about in multiple bordering nations. Preparations have been underway to receive refugees. And of course, estimates of the amount of refugees, if there is a full-scale Russian invasion, and that's certainly what we're looking at this morning.
Yeah, UVXY would probably jump tomorrow, but it might be too late, especially if we get sort of a peak of volatility.
People wait so long? Why are they all flooding onto the highway now? I think that speaks to the fact that for many people here in Ukraine, what is happening today is the unthinkable. To be attacked with rockets, with missiles, with bombs from Russia in their capital city was to many people here unthinkable. So they haven't left until this morning when they could hear for themselves the explosions. Trace?
Yeah, it just seems to me, Steve, and I know you're busy and I'm going to let you go, but it seems to me like when these people are leaving and you say that today is the unthinkable, was there a belief here from the days that you have been here that these people believed that Vladimir Putin was just not going to go forward with this campaign, or that diplomacy really stood a very good chance of succeeding?
I think there was a belief from top to bottom, from people on the street to journalists who've covered the story for years to analysts, that a full-scale attack was so illogical, was so reckless that it simply couldn't happen. And yet it is happening wider than even the worst expectations. Not just eastern Ukraine, not just the capital, cities in the west under attack as well. Full-scale, major invasion, regime change, the likely goal. Trace?
Steve Harrigan, back to you as the news breaks. We see the traffic right there in Kiev. Those are people, as Steve said, coming west out of Kiev, likely going to or near the Polish border. Many of them could be...
Long lines now at Ukrainian supermarkets as well. And we've seen this for a while here. Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that its military was not conducting strikes against Ukrainian cities. Instead, they used high-precision weapons, making inoperable Ukrainians' army and military infrastructure, air defense systems, airfields, and air forces. European natural gas futures still up 31%.
Russian military attacked Ukraine. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said, quoting here, "The target is the stability in Europe and the whole of the international peace order, and we will hold President Vladimir Putin accountable for that. We will present a package of massive and targeted sanctions to European leaders for approval. Strongest and harshest package." The question is, will it be enough? And will it give the people of Ukraine enough breathing room to be able to stand and mount their fight? Let's turn now to Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson. He is live in Lviv with more. Lucas.
Trace, I'm located in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, about 6 hours west of where Steve Harrigan just reported from the capital. When he talks about
MOEX stock, the Moscow Stock Exchange down about 29% right now. Not that full 30 that we've seen. Dow actually recovering, down about 683 points. Oil still at about 102. NASDAQ down 2.58%.
Told me that he's actually prepared to dismiss the students, use the dormitories, use some of the flats in town to host some of those refugees. Now, speaking of the Russians launching this large-scale invasion, there are some unconfirmed reports. There's video on social media of Russian forces about 5 hours north of this city, where I am right now, in Brest, Belarus, heading south, heading this way. So we'll continue to look at that. Now, as far as conditions on the ground, just after joining you last time, Trace, I took a walk around.
Let's talk about a potential refugee crisis coming out of Ukraine and subways being used as bomb shelters.
People buying large amounts of food, groceries, a lot of potatoes, coffee. This happens to be the coffee capital of the country. People were loading up on supplies. The queue at the ATM machine, long lines of people.
Okay, New York Times now has some footage of Russian troops entering Ukraine that the New York Times has verified. Let's take a look.
Still enjoying that haven bid at the moment, but once this kind of markets starting to...
Yeah, looks like some security footage here of troops entering on the right. Why didn't they just close the gate? Ay. All right.
And yet there are troops that are marching from Belarus down to where you are. You are about 5 or 6 hours away, you said, from where Steve Harrigan is. How far would that make you from where the troops are coming down?
Well, if they just go south, the Russian troops from Brest, Belarus, they'll be here in about 5 hours. A straight shot south on the highway. We're located about 40 miles east of the...
5 hours to get to the capital.
So, you know, this is coming. And like Steve said, a lot of people on the streets here for weeks. So I've been on the ground here in Ukraine for about 3 weeks. I was in the capital for 2 weeks. I've been here for about a week. Nobody saw this coming on the ground. Certainly, we're getting the warnings from the Pentagon and from the White House. But whenever we spoke to people on the streets, they just shrugged.
We are also seeing a recovery here on BTC, just like we saw on futures, at least for the time being. We're getting a little bit of a recovery here. 35.7 on BTC right now. Oh, over the invasion here.
Iskander short-range ballistic missiles that took out, from what the Russians claim, are airfields and military targets in Ukraine's air defense system. You would expect, now that the air defenses have reportedly been neutralized, then you'll see, helicopter gunships. Remember, we've seen these.
Gold almost up a complete 2% now. Oil still sitting at 102.
Showing dozens of Russian helicopters in Belarus and Crimea. So you'd expect those will be launching perhaps later today.
I'm curious, Lucas, why leave Kiev and go to Lviv? I mean, is there a sense that if you get to one of these outlying areas, even though it's a fairly large city, that there's no appetite by the Russians to take these over, and that what they really want is the grand prize, which is the capital of Ukraine?
Well, we interviewed a few people on the ground.
Okay, folks. Well, I would say at this point, it is time to get a little bit of sleep before the market opens up. So make sure to check out FTX. Go to metkevin.com/FTX or use that link down below. Check out the programs on Building Your Wealth down below. And I won't be sleeping long because I'm going to be awake for market open. And who knows, maybe we'll do, depending on what things look like, a more broad live stream in the morning or something to that effect. So we'll see. Hopefully things remain stable over the next 5 hours here as troops make their way over to Kiev. Obviously, fighting would lead to more anxiety in markets. We shall see. Anyway, thanks for being here for the last 3.5 hours, and we'll see you in the morning.